Well, I mean, to be fair, he is Super Grover. You're not gonna beat that. He's amazing. Super Grover's my favorite. If I had to choose between Superman and Super Grover, I'd choose Super Grover.
Welcome to Certain Point of View's Another Pass podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Another Pass podcast. I'm Case Aiken, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Sam Alisea.
Hi.
And again, I say as always, but right now we are discussing the origins of this show, and frankly, that was a time before you, Sam, were here.
Yeah, or possibly before I existed. We don't know. I might be a figment of your imagination.
That is true. We don't know when that particular brand of psychosis actually became a part of my life.
Yeah, I may have popped up here and there, but not on the podcast quite yet.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like a beautiful mind. I don't want to go down this route because I know that's not like an accurate representation. So I'm going to stop here. Actually, we've been going too hard on this one. But suffice it to say, today we are wrapping up our discussion of the proto episodes of Another Pass, the ones that were part of the Certain POV podcast in its infancy, because this was like episodes like 25, 6, and 7. Like it was very early for a weekly show in the grand scheme of things, and was the thing that like inspired us to, one, spin off the concept into its own show, and two, actually have me host a podcast, which was a mistake looking back on it. Maybe, I don't know.
I mean, it's too late now. It exists.
Yeah, I've been doing this for almost 6 years now, which is kind of insane.
I will say that this will be the third in the Look Back series, and it is the last one that you guys discussed when you're doing this, because I think it's a great idea. You worked backwards through a trilogy, and this one, much like the movie you're discussing, starts off, decently, and then gets lost.
Oh yeah.
You guys get into a very animated, I don't want to say heated, because I don't feel like there was like real anger. There was definitely passion, but like animated debate about the future of Star Wars, and also the things that you guys wanted to see. And it stems because, let's be honest, Phantom Menace. So this movie is just beaming with potential, and is the first movie that we all saw that crushed my soul after I walked out. And I think it's just because there was so many directions. And also, you and I have discussed this with the other two, is that because at this point, and this is really pointed at anyone that's like, why are all these old people complaining? But at this point, when this movie's coming out, this is so hyped, right?
Oh, yeah.
This is so hyped. Like, we are finally getting another Star Wars. And, like, I mean, people have, like, worn out their VHS tapes. They've already gone out and purchased DVDs. There have been several different, like, people love this. There are books, there are comics, and there are so many different writers. Like, there's not just one cohesive story. Like, you can follow different storylines and through lines, and sometimes Leia, never gets Force powers, and sometimes she does. And so there's a lot of mythos and fan just, kind of canon that is going on, right? There's a lot of headcanon that's already been, and there are, like, whole series that have already talked about the Clone Wars, right? And what they are. And so we, as a generation plus, because there's all the people before us, are going into this movie super freaking hyped. Like, we are so excited to see this film and see this, like, prequel, this beginning, this story of Anakin and how he became Darth Vader. And then they give us a child, because I personally think that they wanted kids to connect with it. And these are children's stories in George's mind. And I get that. But my biggest issue is shoehorning, we know that this is the love story. It's just, there's a lot of weird shit in here. But this movie does have some good stuff and some just poorly executed stuff. And there will be some talking of that. And then a lot of stuff about the future that may or may not come true. Some of it did not come true.
Yeah, it's really interesting to listen to this fossil of a specific era in fandom, because this came out right after Force Awakens, before Rogue One had come out. So, and we talked about this a little bit in the last 2 times, but this is the episode where we're done speculating about what we want to do. And part of that, the fun part about doing a trilogy in reverse or a series in reverse is that you can build on your ideas, but at the same time, you're trying to really figure out, like, well, but could you fracture in more interesting ways than just, when you're talking about if you could rewrite the Phantom Menace and all the trilogy after, would you end up at Revenge of the Sith the way it does? No, you would probably deviate in interesting in different ways. And so there's like a lot of that going on here. And so we're struggling not to go too far. But we've also been doing this for, at this point, 3 weeks in a row. And we just had a lot of like thoughts about the franchise build up, because at a certain point it was like, all right, well, we have so much to say, and we're coming from different vantage points, because like Ben was like a Gen Xer, like, and like Star Wars is like a weird property where it was really the first big like union of Gen X and millennial nostalgia.
Yeah.
Because like the boomers are the ones who like experienced it firsthand. But in a lot of cases, those are the ones who are like teenagers or adults. And so they have a love and perhaps a sympathy for the franchise. And like they want to encourage other people to get into it. But they don't have that childhood nostalgia. And that's like the Gen X era. Like the people who were actual kids, like the 6-year-olds when Star Wars was coming out.
Yeah.
And then those getting really into it, and then millennials kind of as like the little siblings looking up to the Gen Xers and also getting approval from the boomers. So like my dad and your dad and everyone are like, yeah, no, it's fine to get into Star Wars. I remember enjoying it when I was a teenager or 20 something, but it wasn't like a deep part of them. But then you get like I said, the Gen X's are like, yes, we're really into this. And we're like, fuck yeah, we're all really into this. And like, we get really excited. And it's like a unifying moment across generations. Wow. That's a statement right there.
Yeah.
But it's true. Like Star Wars is such a crazy fandom because it's so new.
Yeah. And I think that, for all that people sit around and kind of like complain and nitpick and things like that, and that the fandom can be very toxic, just not doing things, that there is the other side of it, the light side of it, that is, really lovely in the fact that, yes, it is generationally something that brings you together. Like, it's something that my parents enjoyed and saw in the movie theaters. It's something that I watched at home with them all of the time. And then when my sister was born 4 years later, and then, there are moments, there's still tapes, like people are doing like little reactions of their kids watching Star Wars for the first time and posting it online and like having reactions to like, I am your father, and kids going, oh, what? And like parents laughing because they're waiting for this moment. And so there is something cool and there's something lovely about that. And I guess if I were a kid, maybe I would have found more redeemable things in the prequels the way that Gen Z seems to find. Because I find that people in Gen Z tend to defend these movies a lot more. And I think that's also because they actively were watching the Clone Wars in between, gaining more attachment to these characters, where I was like, no, fucking put all the details in the movie. I paid $11. Oh my God, it was only $11. I paid $11. Give me all the information here.
Yeah, it's just like the Enter the Matrix scenario with the Matrix, where it's like, wait, no, don't tell me I have to watch the Animatrix and play the video game to understand what happens in the break into 2.
Exactly. Like, and I get it, synergy, right? Like, this leads into that. Everyone's buying everything. But also, like, don't fucking do that to me. Like, give me what I paid for. And so I think, like, in general, like, I think that so many people our age and like a little bit older, I think definitely most of Gen X and maybe even some of the boomers went into this film, specifically this film, with like ideas of what could be. Because we had basically had fiction writers, like not like one or two, like dozens of them.
Oh, yeah.
Speculating on this universe, building upon this universe, going back in time, going forward in time, you know, kind of like doing that stuff. Like some of the things that were decided on in the newer movies, in those sagas, were a little easier for me to accept as someone who read some of the stuff than my friend that was a pure Gen X person who was just like, that could never happen. Luke would never be a failure. And so like, this is like all about perspective. Like when you came into the fandom actually definitely affects it. So if you're listening to this and you happen to love, this particular movie, Phantom Menace, and you love pod racing scenes, well, good for you. Like what you like. That was too long for me. It was too long for me. And these gentlemen that you're about to listen to clearly have an opinion on it as well.
Yeah. I mean, Ben is a thorough Gen Xer, although he has kids, and that has been a way that he really has bonded with his son by them having like a shared appreciation of Star Wars. And then Addy's a little younger than me, so we're actually like a pretty good spectrum in terms of like where this like fell into our fandom. But yeah, we got into it. And then again, this is right after Force Awakens. We were all so excited. They were big fans of the Clone Wars, which is a series that I'm only now watching. Like I'm almost done with season 1 at this point. And it's good. It's
Yep.
way better than I thought at the time. Cause I really liked the cartoon one, the Tartakovsky one, the Samurai Jack creator, and Primal's amazing, by the way. Go watch that. But that series was the one that like caught my attention because, and like it's had its own like kind of weird nostalgia there. But anyway, Clone Wars is good, and I appreciate the new work people have done. But yeah, I was super invested in like the books and stuff of the earlier era. Anyone who listens to Scruffy Nerf Herders can hear how much of like the Legends timeline I incorporate into plots and so forth. Because like the Young Jedi Knights, like young adult series, I fucking read the shit out of that in middle school.
That was good.
You know, all the like the like the Zahn.
It was a good series.
Oh yeah, it was great. And I will defend to death Lobaka and his like weird bronze mace shaped lightsaber. It was fucking dope. But you know, like we all had like feelings about the Phantom Menace, and the Phantom Menace actually canonized a lot of that extended universe. Like we talk about it here, where like they openly call things Sith. They reference the Rule of Two. They have a lot of stuff that like embrace that universe, and then we just threw it all out when we got to the Force Awakens.
Yeah.
And Force Awakens is a well-made movie that I was not very enthusiastic about when I walked out. I had to like actually pump myself up for the first time I came on certain POV, and like I maintain it's really well made, and in terms of like being a soft reboot, it opens the door to a lot, but I wasn't very excited about a lot in the way I was with Last Jedi, which I thought was fantastic. Like it's such a different universe from what I had been exposed to, and I thought it was doing really creative stuff. Force Awakens wasn't that, and like I was looking forward to the properties that we had to see, but like, you know, I was into the Plinkett reviews, which is why I like say that like Palpatine's behind the whole thing line multiple times, because that became a running joke at like theater jobs I was at with like Jeff Moonen and like our friend Kieran, who was on episode 100 talking about DBZ abridged. Like that, you know, that was a scene for us where we would just like make the references to the same internet videos of 2012. And that was part of that era. So I hadn't been far enough away from those biases that I couldn't see how like indoctrinated I had been in this particular subset of like meta criticism. So we're all having a lot of feelings in this episode, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was actually really fun to listen back to, but it is not nearly as comprehensive as some of our other ones.
Yeah, this will devolve. I want to listen. I think that by warning our listeners, they will enjoy it more when they realize that the point is coming, where it's like, oh, here it is. Here's where they lose the thread and really start. it's almost like you guys are you're almost bartering for what you would think would work for a future. And you're like, well, what about this? Well, we haven't seen Rogue One yet, so we don't know what a world without Jedis looks like. And it's just like, it's really funny. And I think that it's especially funny now, right? Because we are now at the end, and now we have like a few properties where there are, whether they be successful or not, on Solo movie, and we have a few properties where we do not have, right, any kind of, like, we don't have a lot of Jedi or Force stuff in it. Or maybe we just have, hints or inklings, like The Mandalorian, with Yodito, which I like better than Grogu. So that's what I call him, Yodito.
Yeah, and I do want to say that this is actually a classic Certain POV episode in that regard, because the three of us, when we would get on a tear about Star Wars, there's so much passion, but actually we don't get angry with each other. We're just trying to find a consensus between the three of us, which is why this is an episode of Certain POV and not actually an episode of Another Pass. Like, it is very firmly in our desire just to like shoot the shit about Star Wars for 5 fucking hours, which is what we did after the first time I came on and after we stopped recording, and we're still mad that we didn't record it all because it was a goddamn episode. And so I am actually rather fondly looking back on this time because like Ben and Addy are great to talk Star Wars about. I hope we can get both of them either together or separately back on the show at some point. We had Ben on for Beowulf. So this, I don't want people to think that we're being like, oh, they lose the thread and it's bad. It's that we just have so much to talk about and we're just exploding with thought.
No, it's great. Like, honestly, it's a slow build because it starts from a comment that fits into the scenario, and all of a sudden, as a listener, especially someone that was not involved in the conversation, you're like, oh shit, where am I standing now? And it's amazing. So I say let's let the bargaining begin. It's going to start off with real solid pitches, honestly. There's going to be some solid pitches, and then someone's going to go in the total opposite direction, and it's going to become a debate.
Yeah, so we're going to drop an ad for one of the shows on our network because Certain POV has grown so large since the time of this episode. Then we're going to come back for the retrospective, and then we'll have another ad, and then Sam and I are going to be back to sort of give our closing thoughts about the episode that you just listened to. So
enjoy.
Ads.
Can you believe we've been friends for 7 years?
And it all started because I compared you to Alana the Lioness.
Tamara Pierce really set the tone of our friendship.
A love of magic,
Briar Moss,
fantasy,
Briar Moss,
powerful women, and of course,
Briar Moss. I'm Anna.
And I'm MJ.
And we invite you to join our Circle of Friendship,
where we do a chapter-by-chapter deep dive into the Circle of Magic series by Tamara Pierce.
We answer important questions like, how does Moonstream let certain dedicates take care of children?
Can you imagine anyone else but Mandy Patinkin playing Nico?
Knives, Briar.
And
knives.
Join us every other Monday at cofpodcast.libsyn.com or wherever you download podcasts.
But seriously, knives.
Welcome to Certain Point of View, your first step into a much nerdier world. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com. And now, your hosts, Ben Milton and Addy Thomas.
Hey, Nerf Herders, I'm Addy Thomas.
And I'm Ben Milton.
We got Case with us.
Yep, doing part 3, guys.
Yep, the Phantom Menace rewrite. Before we get to it, let us know what you think. If you have better ideas for the Phantom Menace, and, or if you don't like our ideas, or you do like our ideas, what you would change, what you would adjust, all of that, you can get in touch with us. Go to our website, certainpov.com, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, and email. All of that, certainpov.com. Case, kick us off.
All right, so for those of you tuning in for the first time, the pitch of this series of episodes is doing the Star Wars prequels right. So we did episode 3, we did episode 2. Now we're doing episode 1. And now episode 1 is the doorway to madness. So the idea is that we're going to pitch the best version of episode 1 with then sort of explaining how it will spiral out to the next 2. But with this one, we've got to try to keep it kind of close to the original, because otherwise we're talking about just totally new movies. So at least we're talking about the same themes, the same basic ideas, or like hopefully stuff from the early trailers and stuff. Like the idea is Lucas put out a draft. The people who were giving him money were like, "Fuck, we need a better idea. We need a different point of view. We need a certain point of view." So, Addy, why don't you give your first ideas?
Sure. So my idea is, well, it ties to the title itself, kind of the way my Attack of the Clones pitch kind of was tied to who are the clones, and so what is the Phantom Menace? Because I guess the Phantom Menace in the current version is Palpatine and the Sith and Maul.
Palpatine's behind the whole thing.
Yeah,
Darth Jar Jar.
Yeah, sure, Darth Jar Jar, whatever, Ben. Just move on.
Get
over it.
Thanks for acknowledging it this time, Adam.
No, I'm treating you like a child that just needs to go to the corner. No, that's not going to go up on the wall in here, just so you know. Not in my house. That is so awful.
This is great radio, guys.
Ben
is holding up a poster.
He has a poster of Darth Jar Jar. I can't believe he spent actual money on it. Your financial decisions at AwesomeCon were the worst this year. I just want to point that out.
It could be worse. When I was at Shore Leave, I just bought a sword. Like, I misheard. I thought she said it was $150, and then she was like, "No, it's $50." And I was like, "Oh, I guess I'm buying this."
All right. Well, anyway, back to my version.
Story, yes.
So I don't have necessarily a full version of the story changed. There are a lot of things that were introduced in Phantom Menace that we hate. I'm not really going to address Jar Jar. I'm not going to address Jake Lloyd. I am going to talk about who the Phantom Menace is, and I actually kind of want a slightly different role for who Obi-Wan is and for who Qui-Gon is.
Okay. If you pitch my exact idea again, I am going to hit you harder than I would hit Jake Lloyd.
I actually want Qui-Gon to be secretly a Sith. And to have Obi-Wan actually be the one who is interested in bringing Anakin on into the Jedi Order. So, because to me, it never really made sense.
You are on thin ice.
I'm scared,
Go on.
I'm scared that we're fairly close on this. But I always thought it was weird that, yes, it's Qui-Gon's dying wish to have Anakin trained by the Jedi, so Obi-Wan does it. But Obi-Wan throughout the entire movie doesn't really like Anakin there's no love for Anakin at all from Obi-Wan. And Obi-Wan throughout the series is a little bit is sometimes played more as someone who is a bit more of a traditionalist. And I would like the idea for Obi-Wan to already be a little bit more reckless, a little bit more willing to go outside of necessarily what the Order is. I like the idea of Qui-Gon ending up being the Phantom Menace to secretly being a Sith who's working with Maul. Let's get, do we really, the rule of two isn't particularly necessary, so you already you already set the idea up that there's corruption within the Jedi Order, and the Jedi Order is crumbling if you have a Jedi Master turn to the dark side. And so then that last fight is Obi-Wan versus Qui-Gon and versus Darth Maul instead of Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan versus Maul. So you have also a chance for Obi-Wan to prove himself big time and to be able to, again, be the hero at the end.
Wait, like a crazy ass fight where Obi-Wan's in the center, like somehow defending himself against both Qui-Gon and Maul attacking him?
Yes.
That's insane and also amazing. Hold on, tell me more.
Yeah. Well, sadly, that's all I have. But that's what I'd like to see that change.
Okay, all right. So, like I said, thin ice a little bit, because here were a couple things for mine. Like, I was trying to keep as close as I could, and there's certain things that are going to sound familiar to those who listen to our Attack of the Clones idea. I had this idea of, what if Qui-Gon survived, and at the end of the movie, was like so disgusted with how the Jedi handled everything that he's like, you know what, screw this, and leaves the Jedi Order and either becomes a Sith Lord and becomes Count Dooku's character in the next two, or he's actually just a good guy and is leading the Separatists. And then Obi-Wan is forced to fight his old master in the next two movies, and like, but he's actually still a good guy. Like, and I think that's actually the more complicated, interesting way of taking it. But it's still cool to have him just, if you need him to be the bad guy and like be a Sith Lord, like have him fall to the dark side because he's disgusted by the Jedi in this movie in particular. So I dig your idea, and actually, like that could work really well if he was. Like, there's no reason Qui-Gon Jinn couldn't just be Palpatine. Like, he's disgusted by the Jedi, quote unquote, and he leaves the Jedi Order, quote unquote, and like goes into politics to try to fix things, quote unquote. And then, like, next thing we know, he's Grand Chancellor, and then next thing we know, he's the Emperor. That could be cool too. Like, that would actually, I mean, that might be a little too like too neat.
But see,
like
I'm fine with Qui-Gon working with Palpatine, because the thing is, the Rule of Two was introduced with Phantom Menace. We could choose.
I think it was in the books before that at some point, but
was it?
It might have been. Either way,
well,
like
as far as
Phantom
the
Menace is where they were like, "Hey, let's take the movies and like let's really marry it to the extended universe that we already had."
True.
Like, that's when they were like the Sith, because at no point in the movies had we seen that before, and they really tied it all together.
Yeah, and the Rule of Two, especially when you look at the Knights of the Old Republic, doesn't make a whole lot of sense for a Sith Order that needs to be able to hold its own against
Palpatine
the Jedi.
Clearly doesn't follow it anyway.
Right. So
well, they later expand on, but like either way, it's kind of dumb, and it was really just there to sort of explain Palpatine and Vader, and then
the
like,
fact that
it's all the same. Fuck, whatever.
Guy. Yeah.
No, so that was a take that I was thinking, and like. Yeah. Here's the thing. So, like, we've talked about this before, the red letter media stuff where they're like, everyone talks in reverse. It's true. If you just reverse the lines for Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, it all of a sudden makes so much more sense in the movie we got. Like, if Obi-Wan Kenobi is constantly the one who's like this rebellious force, and Qui-Gon Jinn is this quiet, meditative, like traditionalist who, let's say he dies at the end, but he reaffirms Obi-Wan's rebellious streak. Like, that's right there just a better movie with almost no rewrites. In fact, all you're doing is switching lines for characters who are in the scene together already, have roughly the same number of lines. Yeah. Cool. Moving on. Like, that would just be better right there. But you know what would be more interesting? If that Trade Federation embargo is actually like a real embargo. Like, if they're really doing a blockade and it's really causing some problems, and maybe the planet has harder issues than this lush like jungle world that everyone has so much life and art and like crazy things everywhere. Like, what if, and here's my idea on this one. So this Trade Federation blockade is actually causing serious issue. We see the problems of the blockade, and like, let's say it's medicine or some kind of specific food. Maybe the human settlers on this planet don't have anything that's really actually functional with their digestive system, or is like missing a key ingredient. And the Gungans might still be there as like the native inhabitants who are able to survive. But the humans are having real troubles, and maybe the Gungans are okay with this blockade because all of a sudden the humans are all pulling back to where they have like stores of like whatever leftover supplies they have. Well, what if the only way in and out of this planet, let's say the Jedi come the same way that they do anyway. They end up on the planet roughly the same way anyway. But the only way off is from a smuggler, and that smuggler happens to be someone called Anakin Starkiller. And he's a teenager, and like he has this great rep, but he gives himself like a badass name, and that way we can bring in the Starkiller thing here. And he's like, yeah, man, like, and it turns out he's actually Anakin Skywalker, and that he's just like trying to have this big like bluster and whatnot. But he's like a very Han Solo type figure, and this is the point where you get to see him being like an awesome pilot. He gets them through the blockade. That's crazy, and they make their way like back to Coruscant, and we have Anakin be the hero of the story, but he's a reluctant one. And then in the course of him like saving the day, that's when they're like, oh, you have power with the Force, by the way, like. We should hold on. We need to talk more. And like,
and how old is he at this point?
I'm saying teenager, like 15.
Yeah. Okay,
I think that's something we all agree on. Like, a much older, angrier Anakin would have made more.
I agree. There's no need for Jake Lloyd.
Like, no need for Tatooine in this. Like, he should.
Yes,
I agree. Like, he could be from wherever, but like Naboo could work fine. But I like the idea of him like actually being the one who's doing runs, getting stuff in and out of the blockade.
Right.
And like. he's got his own ship and it's sort of crazy. And maybe like if you have to have like these like comic relief characters, like they could be part of his crew, so at least there's a reason for them. Right. And like it's not just like, oh, we have shields we can just go through. Okay, cool. We don't have shields. Shit, we're sitting ducks. What? Like
there's a
none
reason
of that makes
for him
sense.
to have C-3PO.
Yeah. So they do this whole like mission. They get off to Coruscant. They come back. They save the day. And then that's when we get like the Qui-Gon stuff, like either being ultimately turned to the dark side or just turn
away from the Jedi.
Yeah. And I think the longer term story, the better one is him still remaining a hero and adamantly trying to remain a hero, but going in a different direction from what the Jedi Council says. And that's where we see what we talked about with like Count Dooku trying to be a hero, but on the wrong side, like the side that loses. And so he's leading people, maybe bad people, like maybe he's trying to make the most of people who gravitate towards him, but the people who gravitate towards him are crazy rebels as opposed to like the people he's trying to liberate. Mm-hmm. Like he's trying to like let everyone know that there's a Sith and whatnot. The only people who listen to him are the ones who are like vying for power, or like the ones who were like paranoid, like psychos anyway, like, or at least the strongest voices in that group. And so he's trying to like hold this assembly of like loudmouth, like crazy people, but who are now technically on the side of right, because he's like, the Sith actually are controlling the Republic. Like the Republic is now poisoned beyond belief. We can't do anything with the Republic. We all need to leave. And the loudest voices in his camp are then like the people who are the bad guys on that side, like the ones who support him, but they support him because they further their own ends. And either that's just chaos, or that end is like, oh, we get to go off and be free of Republic laws so that we can have like clone slaves, or, you know, something like that. And that leads into like the chain of the remainder of the movies. But this way, the movie, it has stakes that matter for the later ones, because right now the Phantom Menace has only like the thinnest of stakes that matter to the next two movies. Like it has like some very far off background setting things, but the movie that we ultimately have doesn't really relate to the next two and is recapped completely in the next two. This should be at least the seeds of the Clone War, if not already the beginning of the Clone War.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. So I went even further than both of you did with how I was, and I really rebuilt it. There's no Qui-Gon in mine. There's no young Jake Lloyd. We get right into it kind of quickly, because I start off with a baby being left on the stairs of a Jedi temple on a distant planet in the Outer Rim. Some sort of Force-sensitive test is given. Kind of like stacking blocks using the Force for this young child, and the baby, and he's a baby, builds the blocks and then just crushes them, to the delight and then the horror of the Jedi priestess watching this. And from there, we cut to Yoda and the Council debating if who should mentor this young Force-sensitive child, and it's finally agreed that Obi-Wan Kenobi would be the mentor to this child. From there, we cut to the crawl of the movie.
There does the song "Born to Be Bad" like start?
yes,
or but "Bad to the Bone." Like.
Bad to the Bone, yes. From that, now we, and unlike Star Wars, now is when we start the crawl. So there's a prelude, and then you start the crawl, just to kind of give it a different feel and a different texture. And we find out,
well, this is episode 1, so that works, yeah.
Right, that we explained that there's a civil war that's been brewing and the Galactic Senate is bogged down by two opposing views. And the thing that I love about Lucas is how he incorporates myth and also modern politics and events into his story building. So I would do that, if we were doing it now, I would do it now and make it very obvious there's a Republican side and a Democrat side, and that there's these two opposing views, but they're both very corrupt, militaristic, and all these problems, and really sort of just opposite sides of the same coin that are causing all of these problems. And then from there, that the Jedi are conflicted since they're sworn to protect the Senate, but there's these two very obvious divisions in the Senate, and so the Jedi themselves are split down the middle on those lines. And on one side you have Yoda, and on the other side you have Mace Windu. And so there's this sort of conflict happening within the Jedi Order itself.
So kind of like what you're talking about in your clones pitch.
Yes.
Does Mace Windu actually get to be angry and yell at people all the time?
Great. Yes, he does. He really gets to be Sam Jackson. in my version. So we cut to action of like Mace Windu and Yoda arguing about in the Jedi Council about how to proceed and how to deal with this like line being drawn between these two factions at Naboo, and that there's this blockade being set up. So it's agreed that they're going to send Obi-Wan and his Padawan Anakin out to kind of deal with this. So from there we get to see the great relationship of Obi and Anakin along with Padme the senator, young Anakin being the Padawan and sort of young and rebellious, and Obi-Wan being the traditionalist, and obviously Obi-Wan kind of sides more along the lines of Yoda, Anakin sides along the lines of Mace, and so you see like the building for tension in their relationship, but at this point everything is copacetic and we see them working great together. And so that, to me, the first movie is lots of intrigue and lots of adventure and lots of fun of dealing with the Naboo issue and all that stuff. But it's ultimately a failure on their part to prevent a war, leading directly into the Clone Wars. So once we get into the next movie, then in that process we learn that Palpatine's been pulling the strings on both sides to split and weaken the Jedi.
Palpatine's behind the whole thing.
Of course. Cool. Yeah.
Ooh, can I chime in on thoughts of I like the political thing.
Yeah.
You know what would be really cool that would lead into the Clone Wars really well?
Yeah.
If it was like the right to die. Like if everyone was just automatically cloned and like the Senate was really pushing that like you couldn't just like be killed in an accident, like if there was like mandatory like registration of like your DNA and like memories at regular times, and people were like objecting to it because it sort of like created these like artificial people,
right.
And possibly sometimes by accident like duplicates were starting to pop up, and it was like getting like to be this weird headache where all of a sudden there are just clones around, and that's leading into like just people being replicated too much. So like the war doesn't have to be like an invading army of clones or them like raising clones to be the army. Like maybe just cloning as a practice becomes process. Like that practice becomes like disruptive to the society, because all of a sudden like someone thinks that someone died in an accident or like someone was gone for too long, clones are popping up, and like the society itself falls apart because of an overpopulation of people with fundamentally the same memories, and no one quite being able to justify what is the original person versus not the original person, and where does the rights like begin and end. Like
I like that idea. I think it's a great book idea. I don't know, like it's pretty complicated to throw into an hour and a half movie.
2 hours.
2 hours, even a 2 hour movie. It's pretty complicated for a summer popcorn movie. But
I mean, you couldn't be deep. Like you wouldn't have to. The movie couldn't be like.
But that seems like a fairly deep cut.
That's a pretty
it couldn't
deep
be
cut.
like
That's hard to address like on the surface.
Well, you can talk about it. Like I'm not saying like make a movie like The Island, also with Ewan McGregor being like following the clones, but like having conversation about the clones in the background and like like stuff going on. Like you can do it. Like you
could do it. It would
tell
be
that
very
story.
difficult to do. I agree. It would be difficult to do. It would be interesting. It would certainly be an interesting way. So my idea, though, was more along the lines of what we had talked about in the previous episode, with Maul kind of being Palpatine's right-hand man, a visible figure, and he's going around and using the Mandalorians to kind of target attacks and assassinations on both sides to instigate war between the two of them to weaken the Jedi. And, leading into the Clone Wars, where it is all-out war, and we see the separation then between Anakin and Obi-Wan, and the Jedi splitting into and actually having a legit reason to have a war.
Yeah.
And going from there, and in my mind, in the second movie, it's it ends with Anakin falling to the dark side, becoming Darth Vader, so that in the third movie you have nothing but Darth Vader and just a bad time for everybody.
Right. And he can be Darth Vader even before the suit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Totally. And you can have a confrontation between Obi-Wan and Anakin, and him losing and then becoming getting stuck in the suit.
Yeah, it'd be fun if you dealt with sure, you want the parallel of the arm getting cut off, but if he had other body parts injured, if he had was slowly losing his humanity, if he was the Tin Man scenario, and that's in the original Star Wars pitch, in the Star Wars, the original pitch, I forget the name of the character who's clearly the Obi-Wan analog, but the name's slightly different, who is just a head on a cyborg body, that's all that's keeping him alive, like if Anakin
very much like
maybe like
Grievous.
he had like an artificial heart like Tony Stark, and like he had like a couple like other like non-major parts. His arm was like his big detail that was like fake,
most obvious,
like,
yeah.
But he was like mostly human, but he had like a few other things, like maybe one bionic eye, which is contradicted, sure, in the later stuff, but who knows what his eye really looked like. Like it was kind of pussy. Like, you know, you could have those details like thrown in, like. And then that is Darth Vader, but the Darth Vader thing isn't just that he like is in the suit, like
right.
But he's already started to lose his humanity,
piece
like,
by piece as he falls to the dark side.
Yeah. So it's not like one thing and then one big thing.
Yeah.
It's lots of little things.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, so that's how I would remake that movie, because I think we all agree, like, the problem with the first movie is who cares about 8-year-old Anakin Skywalker and pod racing?
Are you an angel?
Yeah. The character development is really weak.
Yeah.
The time on Naboo is just weird and kind of floppy.
Yeah.
It's unclear as to what exactly Palpatine's doing and what his motives are and how it's all fitting together. Like, it's a mess of a movie.
Right. But I will say this. If Palpatine was unclear as the villain on purpose, and I think the point was that they didn't want to directly tie Palpatine to being... like Darth Sidious and like all this stuff, like,
oh, just stop.
That's
Jar
fine.
Poster.
Like, the thing is, it's not subtle enough, but also like just it's not clear, but it's also not like really like charming and intelligent. Like Palpatine, like putting everything. Yes,
Jar Jar.
Put that down. Like the Palpatine like manipulating everything stuff would be really cool if the first movie could exist by itself. Like if could exist as a way that you could watch that movie and understand like the Star Wars universe and then watch all the remaining ones after it. But like the current order of episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 doesn't work as a structured movie. Like really what they need to make it is, if you want to have it be like this subtle like buildup of Palpatine pushing like chess pieces into place, 1, 2, and 3 needs to be a standalone movie, or like needs to be like a movie that introduces the world of Star Wars to everyone in a way that's doesn't expect you to understand, and needs to at least leave some surprises. Like the I don't know how they would tie Luke Skywalker. Maybe they just don't have Anakin be Skywalker. Like, he doesn't fucking have to be Skywalker. I don't even really think they ever call him Anakin Skywalker. They just, or do they?
Well, they say the son of Anakin Skywalker.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, I don't know, but like find a way to have like the Anakin Star Killer thing that I pitched, like that's his like pseudonym.
Yeah,
like,
I
his
think
Dome de Plume. Like,
I think you kind of have to, because like it is a prequel, and you do have some significance in the relationship between Obi-Wan and Anakin, and knowing it was never one of the problems I don't think we ever had with the prequels was knowing that relationship was doomed. We always wanted to know how it was going to end up being doomed. And the problem was that turn just never worked.
This would be hard to do, but what if there was a bait and switch? Like, there was someone else that was like a red herring for who Darth Vader was?
I think that could work for who Palpatine was, if it wasn't obvious that Palpatine was his real name.
Yeah, and like the expanded universe really kind of limited that.
Yeah.
Right, but I think with Vader, I think we want to see his story. We want to see the fall, so that the redemption.
It could be
also
interesting
makes
if between
sense,
2 and 3, all of a sudden Vader is on the scene, and like we had like a very strong like red herring that was like, oh, that guy is goddamn Vader, and Anakin fell in battle, like something like that.
Well, actually, going on that, I could see that there's another villain who is Darth Vader, and that Anakin takes on the title.
If Darth Vader is just a title, like which it is, but I mean like a title passed down, like
that he takes on that persona, so that even again from a certain point of view, Obi-Wan is absolutely right in that Darth Vader killed Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah,
in a way. You know.
Oh, that'd be interesting if it looked like Anakin Skywalker died at the end of episode 2 at the hands of Darth Vader.
The problem is Obi-Wan all along knows.
Right,
so.
yeah. Like, it is always the problem. Like, the problem is that 1, 2, and 3 does not have the tension necessary for, like, a surprise. And, like, if it's going... Which is why it doesn't work as episode 1, 2, and 3. It works as a flashback in between episodes 5 and 6. Like, it's the same reason that the Godfather, the complete epic, is not a great movie to watch because it spends 3 hours doing flashbacks of Vito Corleone before you get to the actual Godfather movie. And then you just have like half of Godfather Part 2 without any of the flashbacks to like sort of relate the scenes of Michael at all. It's just like an awkward thing. That's what these movies are. Like 1, 2, and 3 require you
to know the
you have to know
4,
everything,
5,
but at
6.
the same time, there's no dramatic stakes because you know everything. Like, if it was 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, and 6, it's good. But because 4, 5, and 6 all came out, it doesn't work.
Yeah. I don't totally agree with that. I think you can still.
I don't agree.
I think
with
there's still drama in seeing the fall and knowing how it happens.
Yeah.
I think
but not in how these movies are structured and the way that they are presented. I'm saying that there is drama, but that drama needs to be embracing the fact that this is not the first, second, and third movie in the series. It's that it is the
fourth, fifth, and fifth.
Yeah, fourth, fifth, and sixth.
Yeah.
That they have to embrace that fact, and the fact that it is a
we
prequel,
already know where it's going.
Yeah. Like there are great series that have done like go to prequel episodes or like flashback episodes or do flashbacks in the midst of things, or like I just said, Godfather Part 2 works really well with like prequel stuff, but like it doesn't. They don't embrace the idea that they are the first movie in the chapter then.
Right.
Because episode 1, you start the movie and you assume everyone knows what Jedis are.
Yeah.
And you assume everyone knows who Darth Vader is and Anakin Skywalker is and what Darth Sidious is actually Palpatine and he's Emperor Palpatine. Like they assume a lot of things of the audience. And that's why I think it doesn't really work that well as episode 1. It works really well as a flashback.
Yeah.
And there's narrative significance. There's an argument in favor of originality in that I think is not warranted in America. I think that and I might have talked about this before, but the tension of how things happen is a valid one, but you need to embrace the fact that it's not a surprise that you're masterfully crafting a story that we've already heard before.
Absolutely.
Like no one can be surprised if you do like this fantastic Snow White story, and it turns out that there's dwarves, and it turns out that there's a witch that is her stepmother. That story is one that we already know, but you're doing it really well. So the thing isn't doing jump scares and being like she was your stepmother all along. Like no, it has to be like the really well done version of a story and by structuring it as this is the first episode in the series, like it invalidates the way that they tell the story.
I can see that, yeah. Ben, did you have anything to add to that? You were nodding yes and no to some of those.
I think that movie, like for that movie, I want seeing 4, 5, and 6, knowing how Vader ends. I want to see, I went into those movies really wanting to see how it happened. Like you're right. I didn't like the way it was executed, but I liked the idea that I was going to finally see the birth of Darth. Like, how did he become Darth Vader? Who is Anakin Skywalker? What was Obi-Wan Kenobi like? And how was he, related? And how did that relationship work with Anakin? And I really wanted to see that. And I still do really want to see that. I kind of wish that they would just say the prequels aren't canon and redo them. To be honest with you, that would be the best thing that they could do. To be honest,
if it wasn't for Clone Wars, I would agree with you.
Right, right. Clone Wars fixed a lot of the problems.
Yeah,
didn't make it perfect, but it fixed a lot of the problems.
And what's interesting? If Lucas had certain dark plans for a particular character, he probably would have done it in the Clone Wars. I just want to, your Darth Jar Jar theory.
I think it was too late for that. I think it was totally too late for that.
Here's the thing. We are seeing with the Star Wars, like with Rogue One, for example, we're seeing a prequel movie that is doing it the way that I'm saying that, like, the story of episode 1, 2, and 3 probably should have been. Like, episode 1, 2, and 3 probably should have been the Clone Wars. And this is like a broader kind of concept thing. Like, it probably should have just been the Clone Wars where, like, these things are happening as part of this other story.
Yes.
It shouldn't have been, this is the story of Darth Vader, because that puts so much weight on it to fulfill like a specific story type, as opposed to we get to see it play out amidst this larger war. Like, the Clone Wars was the thing that we knew about, and we should have seen those details play out and in this movie structure, that it wasn't just putting Vader at the forefront as like this whole, like, we need to get to having Vader and we need to have Luke over there. Like, finding out the hidden stories about it all, that's cool, but it should feel like those are the gems that are in this movie.
Yeah. Interesting that you brought up Rogue One as a prequel. That's a war movie. Do you think there is room for, or a possibility ever for, a movie that takes place just somewhere in the middle of the Clone Wars with Anakin and Obi-Wan, Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen, with a good director, with a good writer, with someone who maybe could actually bring a good performance out of Hayden Christensen?
You say that like it's impossible. Like, they are good actors.
No, but that's exactly. Well, I don't say that's impossible to bring it out of Hayden Christensen. I'm just saying it wasn't. George Lucas was not the guy who was going to do it.
I think it is. It is getting harder and harder every year.
As they're getting older.
Yeah.
I think they're getting old.
Too old for it.
I don't know if it's impossible yet. Like, it's been a few years. But, and I will admit,
Ewan McGregor doesn't look that old.
Ewan McGregor does not look that old.
Yeah.
I have not checked in with Hayden Christensen.
I don't think anybody has.
But I'm presuming he could look fine for being like the more mature Anakin.
Jake Lloyd.
Yeah.
Oh God, no.
No, Hayden Christensen. Well, there was the rumor that Hayden Christensen was on the set for Force Awakens at one point for that whole like weird Force Ghost thing with.
Like, I'm assuming that they could, if he. The worst case scenario, beyond him being out of shape and all that, like, which the gym is the answer, is let's say he starts balding, or he like has started to sag in some ways. Like, those are all things that makeup and wigs can cover.
Right.
Which
do you
would
think
be
it's
fine.
just the fans don't want to? Nobody wants to touch that. It's just. Do you think it's so
Disney
untouchable at this point?
I don't think it's untouchable, but I do think that it is something to deal with, and you'd have to be like.
I think you've already covered it in the Clone Wars.
Well, no, but I mean, there's again the Clone Wars we never finished. We're
talking about getting a movie as opposed to a TV show or
just
like
a
side
single,
project, like
a war movie focused on a single battle that has just an experience that is instrumental to who Obi-Wan and Anakin are.
What additional are you going to get out of that you haven't already gotten?
I don't know.
Point?
I mean,
what's the point? Well, okay, but this is what you're saying you want. But why?
Yeah.
What do you want out of that? Other than to say it's a live action movie
to tie
with
it all
you
together.
and no, it's already tied together.
Because here's the thing: what if you did the movies that we talked about as like ideas?
It's not about being part of the saga, and because I think this would be an anthology movie. It's not about being part of the saga and tying up this big thing about the nature of the Force, but it's a chance to see. Because we're getting a chance to see who Vader is in other stories.
How can you think about what you're saying?
Yeah.
You want a Skywalker, not in a saga movie.
I'm saying as a cameo.
Vader in Rogue One.
Yeah, we're seeing a Skywalker in it. Like,
yes,
I'm saying
you're seeing Vader in a role, but it's not about him.
Right. That's what I'm actually saying right now. What if it was a movie where, like, that one that we talked about being like a platoon style thing with the clone troopers, and we have them briefly in it, but we get to see like Anakin.
Okay, well, then
how Anakin looks like to the clone troopers. That could be really cool.
Okay, but that's fine. But
hold on,
they're not.
Hold on.
Like, they're not the leads.
But hold on,
we're not talking about them being
But
leads.
we've also seen some incredible storytelling outside of the movies in the comics. Where's that VR experience? We're seeing. I mean, we're seeing a lot of other things already. Vader's been the focus of some of it. The best comic is the Vader comic, and it's exploring who that guy is, how he this is a guy who is answering to Grand Moff Tarkin and is part of the biggest military failure of the Empire at that point, and is sent off spiraling into space, and somehow by Empire knows Luke is his son and is in a position where he can force choke to death any admiral that he wants. So there was clearly a story to be told there. I can imagine that there's a story to be told in the Clone Wars as well, because we saw some great storytelling in the Clone Wars that hints at this is the darkness in him, but this is the light in him as well. A lot of the instead of the whiny kid who hated sand and had an awkward romance.
Yes.
You know, I think there's room for good storytelling.
There is, but we've already gotten it for that character.
Yet there are comics coming out all the time. There's
comics
other
are coming
stories.
out at the Clone Wars. Their comics are coming out after New Hope.
Had a comic that's come out actually between episode 1 and 2 with a very young Anakin and Obi-Wan. We have Kanan during the Clone Wars. We're getting stories in those.
I know, but what I'm saying is, what else are you going to? Yeah, and that's comic books.
I get that we're not going to get any. Yes, we're not going to get a significant.
Like, why would you tell
reveal.
that story in such an expensive, audacious way? It's like we were talking about, San Diego Comic-Con and Marvel.
Yeah.
It's a hell of a lot easier to tell that story in a comic book than it is in a movie.
Yeah.
What are you what do you need to see?
The spectacle of it? The spectacle of the battle?
Well, if
you can tell that, and you don't need Darth Vader to do that.
Well, let's say Anakin,
or Anakin Skywalker.
The goal of Anakin being in this isn't to show off. Here's the thing about Anakin, like his deeper character stuff. Like, what if it is just to show off what Anakin looks like to the common man? Which, sure, he's not the main character, but he could be a character throughout the movie. Like, he doesn't have to be like just a quick cameo. He could just be like this omnipresent hero that everyone is like awestruck by, and maybe he does something bad at the end of it, and like the troopers lose their lives or something, and we start to see a little bit about the darkness, so we get a character beat for him. But for the most part, what we're really getting is how the world as a whole sees this hero of the Clone Wars right there. Like, that could be a really cool project. And like, I mean, ultimately, what are you getting out of any of these things? We've told the broad stroke stories, so we're just trying to get to the nitty gritty for all of them anyway.
Yeah.
My problem with that idea is it's still a Star Wars movie. That's a pretty dark tale to tell for a Star Wars movie. Let's not, like, these movies are aimed for kids. Lucas' original intention wasn't, to reach, 30 and 40-year-old nerds. It was to reach kids. Telling a story where the hero Anakin Skywalker ends up killing, getting people killed and everybody killed. Like, that's
and
not
the rest of the Jedi Order. I'm just saying. I don't know. I think there's room for a war movie in there.
There's room for a war movie.
What about our aforementioned Saw style, like the security cameras are following Anakin killing everyone? I think it would be worth it if we paid Anakin for that, or like paid Hayden Christensen for that.
Yeah, I don't like those movies. I guess there's room for it.
The younglings like to play a game.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so dark.
I think that the nice thing about the way that they've set up the universe with the saga movies and the anthology movies is they're looking forward of, like, we've already dealt with a lot of this stuff that we already know what we already know. We've already dealt with Vader and Luke. And we're kind of moving forward now. We're trying to, like, with the saga films, we're trying to figure out, like, what's happening with Rey. And yes, Luke is involved, but it's really about Rey.
Right.
Okay? It's not, and Vader's involved, but only because he's Vader. It's just continuing on that film.
Yeah.
Now, the other films are filling in the holes there, but they're not involved with the Skywalker family necessarily. They're out there and they're part of that, but we're expanding the universe. We're not stuck in this, like, whoa, I want to see more Anakin. I want to see more Vader. I want to see more Obi-Wan. We do, but it's different. It is different, Addy.
We're getting a whole...
You're rolling your eyes,
We're getting
but it's
a trilogy about a young Han Solo.
Yeah. But that's not Anakin. That's different. That's not a Jedi. That's not the Jedi Order.
Star Wars
Here's the thing. I think once we see Rogue One, we can talk about what these other movies are, because Rogue One might play in a lot to either episode 7 or 8, but we don't know yet. Like, what it looks like is just the mission that happens right before A New Hope, but they might be tying it in as a movie that really matters in relation to understanding other movies in this new franchise they're building, but we don't know yet. So it's hard to say what has merit as a Star Wars movie. Like, what is them just spinning their wheels versus doing something new? Because we know that there's a movie coming out that is a prequel to the first Star Wars movie, which is this, like, the description of what Rogue One is could have been what Episode 1 was.
Well, but the thing that I'm trying to get across is they've said that the anthology
actually could have been what Episode 3
are
was.
about the Skywalker legacy.
Right.
Everything else is about, outside of that. The Skywalker legacy is like the through point that drives the entire Star Wars universe.
Right.
Okay, and so you can have a Han Solo trilogy that doesn't have anything to do with the Skywalker legacy.
Right.
And yes, Han Solo is one of your major characters. That's fine, but it is not necessarily it's not directly attached to that main throughput of the Skywalker legacy. Does that make sense? You understand what I'm trying to say?
I don't think every Anakin story, though, necessarily needs to be tied to what the fate of the Jedi Order is.
But it is by nature, by the fact that it is a Skywalker, that he is Anakin Skywalker who becomes Darth Vader. It automatically ties. It's automatically attached to that. It's automatically attached to that. And the only way that you can avoid that is kind of like what Kay says, and just have him an ancillary character that you kind of see.
But see, the thing is, when I read the Darth Vader comic, I don't think about the balance of the Force. I think about Vader as...
Well, that's good. It was a well-written thing, and it took you away from that whole, like, stupid idea.
Well, I mean... I like this. See,
I know. I'm just trolling you right now.
I know. But I think about... This is about Vader, and his relationship to the Emperor is a big part of that.
And to Luke.
Right, and Luke is a big part of that as well. But,
which ties into Return of the Jedi.
Well, yes, and ties directly and more, into who he is going into Empire. But again, like that, I think there is room for a war story along the way.
Yeah, and we're getting it. And it doesn't have to do with Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah.
We don't need Anakin Skywalker to have a war story in a Star Wars universe.
Well, here's the thing. Like, episode 1, 2, and 3 are about Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi. They didn't have to be. They could have been about anything else that led ultimately to episode 4.
Yeah.
Like, episode 4 is where, like, okay, Darth Vader's in this position, Obi-Wan's over here, Luke's over here, here's some of the backstory stuff. But it could have been about other things that happened that led to that point. It, like I just joked, like Rogue One could have been episode 3. Like, and it didn't have to be at all about Darth Vader.
Right.
Like, it doesn't have, like, the fact that 1, 2, and 3 are about Anakin Skywalker becoming Darth Vader, and that Darth Vader has such a pop culture cachet to him.
Yeah.
Sort of makes the 4, 5, and 6 feel more like they're part of the Anakin Skywalker and the Skywalker as a whole family tree legacy, but it only is because we reinforced it by putting out those 3 movies and by having later ones or like other like expanded universe stuff that like tied into it all. But it could have been about like the Han Solo's career. Like it could have been about other people in the rebellion. It could have been just about Palpatine.
That's true.
Like those movies create a larger, like if you're trying to like create the line of the story, like by putting further and further back details, then all of a sudden it becomes more of like a singular line of Skywalkers. But it could have been from a different direction, hitting Han or hitting Leia, and Leia ultimately is a Skywalker, but like hitting like a detail in there and then like having it like, we know 4, 5, and 6 had like this trajectory, but that trajectory could have come from a different angle is what I'm saying. So like the fact that we make Anakin have so much weight, that the idea of doing a spin-off movie where he's featured or that he even could be the star of means that like it has to be like all this gravitas and he has so many implications, is a construction of episode 1, 2, and 3 ultimately. Like if 1, 2, and 3 had been about totally different things and you wanted to do that Anakin story, we haven't seen it. Like we still haven't seen it. Like it's not like we're retreading. We're just, but we
have seen a majority of it. We saw a lot in the Clone Wars. I mean, that's all Clone Wars was about, was Anakin Skywalker running around and having battles and doing all of this stuff. We've seen that. We've seen what Anakin is like. Like that's what I'm saying is like, how many more battles do we need to see in, with Anakin and Grievous or Anakin and Ventress and Anakin, and Obi-Wan and
I mean, we had 4 more years worth of storytelling that
we did, but
here's
how
the thing.
How much of that, honestly though, how much of it was a retread?
They used to
because what it started to do was when they talked about it, a lot of what they've said that they were going to do was shifting the away from Anakin and moving. They were telling stories about Ahsoka.
Right.
Okay,
which
so
they
let's-
did throughout
so
the
let-
series, and
yeah.
you even mentioned that the series is really more about Ahsoka in one of our
Right,
episodes
because they
recently.
told all the stories that they could really tell about Anakin.
No, because they need to space out those Anakin moments. Because I was watching a couple things about Anakin, and they wanted to make sure that they paced out some of these moments for Anakin. So there's plenty of other. Again, I know we can harp on this forever, but I think there is, because we're gonna get more comics about who Anakin is. We're gonna get more books about who they are.
And
So here's
that's
the weird thing.
fine.
They
I just
used to
don't
have
think it
a
makes
rule.
a good movie.
They used to have a rule, like the editorial staff for the expanded universe, that they couldn't do the stuff right before episode 4. Like that, it was like off limits because all it did was it sort of shoehorned like the narrative into this very narrow framework, and then restricted like additional stuff from dealing with material kind of related but doesn't have to be, because all of a sudden they have to deal with like the continuity of it all.
Right.
Like as we've talked about, like the stuff with like Admiral Thrawn. Yeah, he's coming back, but like Admiral Thrawn, like his whole story deals with like cloning technology that contradicts what we ultimately saw when they finally did tell that story. Like there used to be just sort of an impetus, like, no, move in a different direction, do different things. And now, kind of because of the prequels coming out and like the Clone Wars and all this stuff, we are constantly going back to that same time period, like the period before episode 4, because we want to like talk about all the things that could have happened. And like there's years of these characters running around and being relevant people in the galaxy, that there's surely infinite stories, and we want there to be infinite stories, and we have so many ideas for these stories, but it's probably a bad idea. Like it's probably all a bad idea. Like the Clone Wars sure fixed a lot of things. It probably told us more than we needed to know, because now we've seen it all. Like, you know, there was a reason why if they were going to do a past story, they went thousands of years in the past, and like you could do stories, but they kept on having like push further and further into the future and like do different kinds of things. Like now every time we try to talk about a Star Wars story, it is stuff that takes place around the timeline of the original movies or right before it. Like,
because nobody really likes what happened in the prequels.
Yeah, well, that's also part of it, and we're trying to fix it, and like what we're doing right now, or we started doing with this podcast before being horribly derailed. So ultimately, episode 1 was kind of a disappointment, and 2 was kind of a disappointment, and 3 was kind of a disappointment, and we want to do better things. And they made a cool cartoon in the Samurai Jack style that sort of filled in the blanks, and we liked that. And they made ultimately a cool CGI show and like another CGI show, and they keep trying to do things to sort of make these first 3 movies better, but they're deeply flawed movies, and no amount of like you know, justifying and rationalization makes it better. Like episode 1, going back to like talk about this, I was like, oh, I guess like the ring theory has like a certain merit of like the natives of like the Gungans like being kind of like the Ewoks. Like, okay, I guess that kind of makes sense, but it is still stupid. Like the movie is still bad.
It is still
like,
flawed,
it's ambitious, and I respect it. I respect a lot of the ideas of the first movie more than the next two. The next two almost get it right, kind of, but they're not as ambitious as the first one. But and that's the problem. Like the first one is like this brilliant failure, and that's why we hate it.
Yeah, and as much as I hate the pod race, it was still an interesting idea to go with.
Yeah, and the fight choreography there is meaningless, but really good.
really fun to watch. Yeah. And that's, you know, as I was thinking about how I would fix this, and I was doing my rewrite for it, and I was like thinking back about this movie, that idea kept coming to my head of like, man, this was just, there was a lot of like really great ideas that were kind of presented, and you've said this many times, Addy, like there's so many great ideas in episode 1 that just fall apart or fall flat and just don't work ultimately. Do you know, and that was the struggle I had. I was like, do I continue to go with some of those ideas? Do I embrace some of those ideas and try to fix them? Or do I just like wipe the slate clean and say, you know what, let's just make a good movie? Like how, like that was my challenge, because I think Lucas and even, you know, going all the way back to episode 4, 5, and 6 and the Star Wars, he had this whole idea of how this whole play was gonna take part, and who, you know, Star Killer and you know, Fall of the Father and the redemption and stuff like that. These are all like big themes that he was thinking about even way back then before he made the prequels. I think, you know, it's hard to get away from that story. It's hard to tell Star Wars stories and go back to the prequels like you were talking about, of like they don't have to be that. I think it's hard to get away from that and still stay true to the original idea of what Lucas was creating with that story. I think you lose a good bit of that when you kind of go, forget the whole like idea of like the fall of Anakin and stuff like that, and let's tell a bunch of other stories. I don't think, you know, as a lifelong Star Wars fan and seeing those films as a kid and following it my whole life, I really wanted to see that story.
Well, I mean, like the prequels are married to that one central idea, and like if that story had happened as part of other stories happening, that would have been a better structure for the movies. Like Luke's ascension as a Jedi is one story in the original trilogy. Like, but Vader's fall is the story of the prequels.
You know, there's attempts at other stories in the prequels.
Attempts, but they're failures.
Yes, but that's just bad script writing.
Yeah, well, but that's the thing. Like, he tries to sort of like focus on characters who ultimately should have been.
Well, so is Vader's fall. That's a failure of a story too.
That is. Yeah, it was really badly done.
I mean, the joke of like the first movie is like, who's the protagonist? Like, it's hard to say. Anakin doesn't show up for a while. Obi-Wan's not an active agent.
Mostly Qui-Gon.
It's mostly Qui-Gon, but Qui-Gon's like this distant, aloof character, like in a lot of regards. Like,
and ends up dying.
Yeah. So it could have, if it had been movies that were about other things going on, and like Obi-Wan meeting Anakin and Anakin rising up and falling, were main plots, but not necessarily the only plot or like the sort of central plot of each episode, that could have made it better too. Like, it was just this one thing had been so built up, and we had talked about it, and I knew exactly how the fight between Obi-Wan and Anakin happened, like that left Anakin like so horribly wounded, like like a full decade before the movies came out. Like, that screwed so horribly up any sort of expectation of what this movie was going to be, because all of a sudden it was just like all this focus on that one central story, to the detriment of everything else.
I disagree. I think that they just paced it out incorrectly. I think that they made the Darth Vader, you know, the creation of Darth Vader, the end of that story when it should have been the middle of that story.
It should have been at the end of Attack of the Clones, because I remember going into Attack of the Clones and expecting
that. Yes,
yeah, to become Darth Vader at the end of that movie,
and then Vader just running around the galaxy killing Jedi.
Or if it was going to be the end of the story, it should have there should have felt like more was going on, because we felt like we got to it at the end of Attack of the Clones, certainly at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith. Like, at that point, all of a sudden, it felt like it was Darth Vader. He murdered a person who was like cold-blooded.
Until then, he's just a whiny kid.
Yeah. Like, the thing is, this was such a dominant story arc that the fact that they spread it out over 3 movies made it feel very like slow and tedious and not very fulfilling.
No, I totally disagree. It felt like total knee-jerk.
Well, that it all of a sudden shifts like that. Like, if he
but
had been,
for the longest time, it feels like it's stretched out. But then they realize, oh God, we only have 20 minutes.
If they had
this movie.
If they had a compelling side or secondary plot to go to when he like shifts more, it wouldn't have felt quite so rough, because we wouldn't have been spending all this time with him, like being like, I'm about to be evil. I'm evil now.
Well, and I think that's why most of our pitches have focused on stuff like the mystery involving the Jedi or the clones or the nature of the Jedi Order and the corruption.
Compelling other characters. Like, that's the thing. Like, there aren't really those.
It was building out the rest of the universe so that there's a stage for Anakin's fall instead of Anakin's fall and then just
picking up the pieces.
Just a bad matte painting, basically serving
every
as
pitch
CGI.
Every pitch we've done has had like a cool Mace Windu, because we want Mace Windu to be awesome, but he's awful in the prequels. Like, he does nothing in the prequels.
Or a slightly different nature to Anakin. To Obi-Wan and to Yoda and who they are within the Jedi Order and how Palpatine operates.
Yeah, and pitches for other characters just to be there.
The Mandalorians.
Like, interesting ones to be around.
I see what you're saying.
Like, our Boba Fett pitch from the last one would have been really interesting, but that would have taken up at least a third of the movie.
Right.
Which would have been fine, because the movie spends too much time on certain bullshit details and not enough time on important details. Like, I don't mean to say that, like, they spread out and it's, like, such a slow pace to get to Anakin, and, like, you can see it coming from a mile away, and, like, he's already evil, and he's still evil, and he's still evil, and it's, like it is very knee-jerk, because they still have to have him be the quote-unquote good guy, because they don't have anyone else compelling to be the quote-unquote good guy, so that when he does snap, like, that, because there has to be a snap point, like, that's the way they write movies, like, even if he's like clearly already like about to be the bad guy, like it feels so knee-jerk because they have to delay that part of it to keep us moving with the movie because we have to be with Anakin. Like he could snap kind of in the background or earlier in the movie, and we're following someone else who comes to face the fact.
Which
that
is
Anakin,
a couple of the moments they did in the Clone Wars. They did 2 moments I remember, and there was one where there's an assault on a planet, and the general they deal with is a major slave trader, and Anakin is not willing to follow orders because he's especially angry because this guy is a slave trader and is so much more reckless dealing with him. And then there's another arc where Obi-Wan fakes his death and pretends to be another guy, some criminal, and actually pretends to be the guy who supposedly killed Obi-Wan, and Anakin. Obviously, well, the Jedi Order wasn't prepared for him to go to let loose, but he tries to go and kill this guy who is actually Obi-Wan and all of that. So, I mean, like you start to see how his attachments affect him negatively, you know, and those are things we never really saw. They talked about, but we didn't really get to, you know,
yeah, but they fleshed a lot of that stuff out in the Clone Wars,
right?
Yeah,
right, which goes back to. The prequels should have just been the Clone Wars.
Exactly.
Regardless of what you mean when you say the Clone Wars.
Which is what I like that was something interesting, especially, again, with your pitch and all of our stories. Not so much my pitch, though, but you guys have stretched the Clone Wars across all 3 movies. And I think that is a much more interesting backstory to paint this story on rather than the Trade Federation and Newt Gunray and his overly racist version of the Nemoidians and whatever that was that became the Separatist Alliance. So anyway, so let us know what your thoughts are. If you have any other ideas about what the Star Wars prequels could have been, what your rewrite for the Phantom Menace would be like, what how that would affect the rest of the trilogy, you can let us know all about that. Just go to our website, certainpov.com, Twitter, Facebook, Twitch, email, Instagram, all of that again on our website, certainpov.com. And until next week, stay scruffy, my nerf herders.
Thanks for listening to Certain Point of View. Don't miss an episode. Just subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on iTunes. Head over to certainpov.com.
Did you know Rob Thomas has been writing since the mid-90s?
The Matchbox 20 guy?
No, the guy behind Veronica Mars.
Oh, and iZombie.
And Cupid, Party Down, the Cupid reboot.
I haven't seen those.
Me neither, but we should watch them and then talk about them on our podcast.
Yes. We could call it the Rob Thomas.
No, not that one.
Robcast.
Every other Tuesday with Alex and MJ.
Find us at notthatrobcast.libsyn.com or wherever you download podcasts.
Do.
Mana.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, let's get back. And we're back. So.
Yay! We're back. Are you all still here? Are you okay?
I mean, that was a classic Certain Point of View episode. I think anyone who was tuning into the early days of the show and of the network, that feels like it. Like Ben, Addy, and B had such a good vibe when we get into these big tears. But man, we had a hard time not getting into that, where we were like, all right, let's have structure. And like there are moments where I'm trying to like push on structure in there. But because it wasn't my show, I didn't have like quite enough to be like, we have to hold it together. And I'm not going to say I wasn't contributing. I was definitely like breaking off into crazy directions. But like, yeah, like this is a proto episode. This was an episode of Certain Point of View that was the inspiration for Another Pass, as opposed to being an episode of Another Pass.
Another Pass, which is fairly structured. I mean, we can go on about things, but especially with some films, but we do have a structure, and this was something that was new to you guys, so you didn't have that yet. I just want to put this out there. This is the 3rd episode that I've listened, and Dark Jar Jar always comes up, and I just want to say I've never been opposed to that. I know how people feel about Jar Jar, but I don't think that would have been terrible. So I just want to say that I don't have a proposal for how he fits in to the world or what you would do with him, but I will say that I I'm okay with it. And I don't know if buying a portrait of Dark Jar Jar is a bad investment. I think if it makes you happy, then good for you.
Yeah, that was a good, solid running bit at the time. And I think we're all fans of that fan theory because it did kind of legitimize aspects that were difficult for us to grapple with in terms of like what the prequels actually were. Yeah.
They okay. So let's just talk about, we both agree, and we've talked about this briefly, in the last episode, that Anakin needs to be older in this movie.
Oh yeah.
No matter where you begin him, no matter if you use the idea of a Force baby and blocks, which I did like, or you just start him on an assignment, that kind of thing, or you do make a bond with him and Obi-Wan, which I also actually liked that. I was not a fan watching this movie of how, watching Obi-Wan being, resentful of kind of Qui-Gon's need to have this child on. I mean, I guess, on some level, you could say, well, that can cause a rift between the two of them, right? If their beginning was always kind of awkward. But that's never quite played out. It's never, you know what I mean? And then also, because he's a child, it feels like the resentment is such a dick move.
Oh, yeah.
If he was, 15, right? If he's 15 years old and he's a punk, and Obi-Wan's he's too out of control. You can't, he's done. He's too old. We can't do it. He's out of control already. He doesn't listen to things. I don't think that he's going to be able to understand what he's saying. And Qui-Gon Jinn's no, listen, everyone has the ability to really tap into this. And he's got exponential power. And we just need to help him, find the right path. No one's been here to find the right path. And then you have Obi-Wan still be ugh. Then that kind of works better. But to do it to a 10-year-old kid,
right?
You're just kind of a dick. You're just a jerk.
Yeah, Ewan McGregor's too old actually, and I never really thought about that before. But he actually is kind of too old for the Obi-Wan that's the older brother looking to father for approval kind of model. Imagine the casting of Game of Thrones, which had a lot, by the time they really got up and running, a lot of the kids were a little bit older than the books, but they were still actually really young. Kit Harington was 15 when he was cast. They didn't start filming till he was 17, but we're talking about young people in general.
Yeah.
And you could see them really grow up, and that would be actually really cool. You get a 15 and a 17-year-old, and that's a big difference in terms of size. And you keep both of them kind of looking lean for the first movie, which sounds kind of fucked up, but actors do this. What I really mean is have them bulk up by the time you get to the third movie, and they're both 21 and 23, and in the prime of their life, and have them be in the best shape that they could ever be in, and you could really set them apart as this era, this growth, and have the older Obi-Wan be this big brother figure who raised him practically kind of thing.
Right. Because also if you do the whole sibling, if you put them closer together in age, 5 to 6 years within range, then what you've actually created is a sibling rivalry, right? A rivalry for Qui-Gon's attention. And if you already have kind of the 2x2 kind of thing, you can also kind of say, I kind of feel that's the one thing that they should have left behind. But that's neither here nor there. I feel a Sith army would have been cool, and that's besides the point. But if you're saying for every one Jedi, they take on one apprentice, until that apprentice is fully trained and has become a full-fledged Jedi, you can see Obi-Wan being resentful of this kid being taken on just because he's in the outer reaches, right? Just because he's somewhere that there's not a Jedi Order nearby. And Qui-Gon's no, we're going to train him. And he's hello, you're only supposed to have one, and that's me. Are you serious? And so, what you're saying is true. If you do, the aging of, like Sean Bean and Kit Harington, and then the kid who played Joffrey, who I'm so sorry, you were wonderful, but I don't remember your name. Joffrey, like that kind of aging where like you see that like he's still like, you know, he's a teen and like he's kind of scrawny, but he's a teen and he's got attitude. And like if you can do that aging and you still have Obi-Wan kind of be young and a little bit immature and just be like, Master, like this is not fair. Like like this is not
have it
fair
feel
to
like
me.
a prodigal son story.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and then you can still have that feeling because again, like I just feel like the prequels more so than even the first original series follows a lot like just like biblical kind of things, right? Because they're telling the chosen one story. But you can still do, like, you can do Joseph and his brothers. Like, you can do, like, all sorts of things. Like, you can still take from that source material. Although, please do not make... Well, I've already talked about this. I do not want Amidala to become the Virgin Mary. Like, it's not okay that she does that in the last movie. She's just so about sacrifice and dies of a broken heart. Ugh. Anyway, but like you can still choose other stories like Cain and Abel. Like there's still plenty of source material to kind of base this on and still be of biblical proportions and still have this be like a rise and fall story. And I think like honestly fixing that age gap and just making it like cleaning that up and that relationship cleans up a lot of the series. Like there's still fundamental flaws within this film. And there's a lot of things that like should not have happened. And I still think that like one Sith, one apprentice, fine. But I think that there should be more Siths. Like I feel like
yeah, like there's one apprentice to every Sith master, but there's like actually a lot of like Sith masters out in the wild or something like that. You know, like the Jedi, but they're clandestine.
Yeah, like right, and I just think that like because here's the thing, like no matter what, like even if you're sourcing the entire universe, there has to be people that just went wrong. Like not everyone's going to successfully graduate from the Jedi Academy. You know what I mean? Like so, like it's no matter what, like there in every magical realm kind of thing, right? Like wizards, right? People turn dark. People get seduced by the power that they hold. Like the Force is an incredible power. It is, and like I'm sorry, anger and hate are very easy emotions to feel. They're very, very easy emotions to feel. So I feel like, in general, for this film, I would definitely fix like that relationship just by changing the ages of those two characters. And like honestly, like I love Ewan McGregor, like, and I think that he does such a good job with what he has throughout the series. You know, that I would hate to recast him, but maybe he could still be like Obi-Wan in the last film, you know, just you know, you can jump through time. I don't know. All I'm saying is that age difference really, and then just having this kid be so young, so incredibly young, and then deciding that Amidala was going to meet him and their relationship as it is, and we've already talked about this, it's just super creepy.
Well, and also that Natalie Portman is old. Like she's, and old is a relative term. She's 18 here. She's playing a 14-year-old.
Yeah.
You know, like, honestly, if Hayden Christensen had just been cast from the start.
Yeah.
And, like, you know, like, I don't know exactly what he looked like, 4 years prior to Attack of the Clones. But, like, hey, he would probably look kind of in the, like, he's in roughly the right age range for being a younger brother to Ewan McGregor. Although, Ewan's, like, a little bit on the older side. And then part of that is that we knew him already as an actor, you know? Like, you know, he'd already been playing Junkies and Trainspotting at this point. And, you know.
Yes.
But like Hayden Christensen and Natalie Portman would have looked at like the appropriate ages together. And if they're both playing characters, you know, 4 years younger, that's fine. Like that, You know, like
Right.
we see the
Yeah.
age jump there. That's why, like, the Machete Order, if you cut out Phantom Menace, it actually works fine because you just see these two who look about the same age and they remember them. So, like, they remember being younger and, like, she was more mature and possibly maybe a little bit older, but, like, you know, not creepy. And it's like, oh yeah, remember when we were kids together? Yeah, those are crazy times. Like like that would have worked just so much better. I don't know why they decided to go with Jake Lloyd. I've seen the interview where George Lucas is talking about, like, Jake Lloyd and then the other actor, and they're, like, going, I shouldn't say interview because it's BTS footage. It was like footage while they're going on about, like, who they can get the better take from. And, like, the other kid is like, well, he's the better actor, but Jake Lloyd has the better range of takes. And it's like, I bet we could cut together the right take from this kid. And it's like, no, George, don't fucking do that. You are not an actor's director. Like, that's the biggest thing here. Like, you're not an actor's director. And this, especially the Phantom Menace, like, the Phantom Menace is, I've always said, the most ambitious of the prequels. Like, it's the movie that required the actor's director. It's the movie that required the subtle performances from everyone. And you don't get any of that in this movie.
Right. And again, and we discussed this a little bit when we talked after Attack of the Clones, that these films needed to be slightly more on the political side, because it has to build up something that is a little bit you know, because you have to create the schisms that basically will create the Clone War and basically lead to the Jedi Order falling and, like, you know, basically throw this universe into the hands of the Empire, right? Like, I think, like, that's generally, like, the biggest challenge of this ambitious series, because the truth is that the prequels are very ambitious, because there is this need to keep it light, because it is in George's mind, and for reals, for kids. Like, this is a fantasy space adventure, and he wants to get the kids in on the ground floor. Like, he wants the kids' attention, and this is why I never have a problem with any of the cute characters. Also, I fucking love cute characters. Give me all the cute characters. But I will say that the thing is that this story required some more subtle, like, interesting ways, and not even thinly veiled caricature racist shit, but it needed actual layers within the script to actually start building the real trouble. And I understand. The pod race looked really cool. It does. It does. But it goes on far too long, and it doesn't need to exist, to be honest with you. Like, it doesn't actually serve the story, other than to say, like, this kid is really good at flying. Like, that's what it is. But it's like, he's a little kid, so it has to be a pod race instead of, like, taking a jet and just understanding, you know, like, jumping behind a starship. And, like, if he was older, what could have happened? And I get it. We want a kid because kids relate to kids, but it doesn't work for the overall, what the story actually needed to be an actually good story.
Yeah. Like, this is why I was actually really proud of my idea of it being Anakin is a smuggler living on Naboo and having that be like a Rufio type figure, because, like, that's the character I cared about in Hook. I didn't care about the other Lost Boys. I liked Rufio. He was cool. Like, I was looking for the cool older brother. And, like, I think kids relate to that actually really well.
Yeah.
And Anakin would have worked really well in that capacity because Obi-Wan's not acting in that role. Like, even if you had a young Ewan McGregor who looked like a older teenager, early 20-something guy, he doesn't come off that way. Like, we talk about how, like, the Obi-Wan Qui-Gon Jinn script is flipped. Like, at all points, like, Qui-Gon should be stoic and Obi-Wan should be enthusiastic, and, like, at every spot it's, like, reversed. Like if you're not going to do that, like, have Anakin be the cool, like, exciting young figure who's, like, on his way out to adventure, you know? Like, that would have been perfect right there. And I'm very proud of that suggestion. I just want to say that, because then you get the pilot stuff as part of the escape. You don't need to, like, cut away for a second sequence of, like, we're going go-karting.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, it works really well with my other point with making it a sibling rivalry, because what can happen is that, like, you know, you could Obi-Wan. He's belonged to the Jedi Order for forever. He is a model student. He is always able to find that inner peace and that inner calm and that control. And here comes this cocky son of a bitch who thinks he's like, you know, Jedi's gift to Jedi Order. And Qui-Gon Jinn, my master, likes him. And okay, yeah, maybe his midi-chlorians are through the roof. I still fucking hate midi-chlorians. I hate that explanation. But anyway, his midi-chlorians are through the effing roof, and that's just going to turn his head. And I feel like that works because it's like, he's not qualified. Look what he's doing. Like, he's such a hothead. This is not appropriate. This is not proper. Like, what are you talking about? And it would have been a fun dynamic because, first of all, people love The Odd Couple. And by the end of the movie, they have to figure out how to work together and become the odd couple. And like, basically, like,
God, you're actually 100% correct. Like, that's the thing we were missing in this movie, which was Anakin and Obi-Wan, like, having an enemies to lovers situation, but that enemies to lovers is, my God, you're right. Oh.
Yeah. So now, right, and just as they're starting to kind of get along and understand each other, they see Qui-Gon together. They actually see him get cut down. And this bonds them, because trauma bonds people. And this bonds them. And and they decide to come together, and Obi-Wan basically takes on Anakin as his responsibility, because even though he's rough around the edges, they've been through something together, and they've watched this person that they both cared about pass and be defeated. And they know that there's something bigger than their differences, right? They know that there are Sith out there. They saw Darth Maul. They saw it strike down. They know that there's a threat to the Jedi Order. And they know that there's something larger than whatever, like the fact that, like, Anakin will not clean his side of the spaceship. Like, they know that, and it's fine. And then they're bonded. And then that makes everything throughout the films actually become so much more, because now you have a friendship where, you know, two people don't necessarily agree, but they really do care about each other, and they're bonded. And then that makes that our suggestions for the Clone Wars, where they side with different Jedi Masters as the Jedi Order is falling apart, become more intricate, because they still have love for each other, but they really do see the world differently. And then that makes that final scene, which should not be changed in the third movie with You Were My Brother, that much more poignant, because we actually feel it.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just Ewan McGregor doing the heavy lifting, because I did tear up a little bit at it because he delivered it well, but I didn't really get that in the journey. I didn't really, if I'm very honest, watching these films, I did not experience that journey with them. I didn't experience the brotherhood. And that's what I needed.
Oh yeah, because like that's always the problem with Revenge of the Sith, which is that it's doing all of the heavy lifting of the trilogy. Like, it's trying to cover way too much ground, because the first two movies meandered to get to the point where we needed to be, just from a story beat standpoint.
I think in this particular film, the other thing is that they spend far too much time with Anakin and Amidala bonding. They don't need to bond. They can cross paths if you want, like, destined to be. They've crossed paths. Oh my God. They can cross paths, and she can still be an intricate part of the movie, because, like I said, politics needs to be in there, and she is the Queen of Naboo. But I feel like that it should feel more like how Empire felt, where there's like two storylines going on that kind of interact, kind of happening, so that you're seeing what's happening in one place and seeing what's happening in another. And I think a space mission is like the perfect thing, like a smuggling thing, where they're smuggling something to Naboo. And I know that this ruins Jar Jar, which, you know, I support Jar Jar. I don't care what people say. But maybe he fits in later on, or maybe he's just with Amidala and telling his jokes to her. Because that almost makes sense, because they share a planet, and he realizes that something's wrong, and he goes to her and he's like, yeah, I know that other Gungans don't talk to you, but like, I know that this is there's something that's up. And you can still have that character be in the series, and probably it would be better because he's not only used for like just kind of comedic relief, and also to make sure that all the kids are having a good time through the serious stuff, but he's there to like, he actually has a bigger motive, right? Like he finds something out, the Gungans won't listen to him, and then he goes to Amidala and kind of like appeals to her, and she realizes that something has to happen, and she goes to the Senate, and she realizes that it is an ineffectual body, and that it is no longer doing what it's like. And then she calls a couple of smugglers because God knows why. I don't know. This needs to be storyboarded and worked on and fleshed out.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, the politics side is such a frustrating aspect looking at the ultimate product, because it's just that George Lucas is a wealthy, well-off, but well-intentioned liberal, you know? Like, and he's always been. Like, he was into racing cars in high school and college and got into filmmaking as an aside after he was hurt in a really bad accident. Like, that's the kind of opportunity you only get when you're a rich California boy. And he hasn't, like, I always think that he has had good politics, but has not been able to actually relate to it directly. Like, you know,
I feel like in general, and this is from not knowing him, right? So this is just a call from a fan. I think that like there are things that George Lucas is genius at, and that is like how something should look. Like he really like, you know, but I don't know if George Lucas knows how to people. Like just in general, like not even just directing, but sometimes he's very awkward. And again, the world is still very white. This like the one of the things, you know, that has always been kind of a thing, and it's just that like I feel like with this movie because oh god, who's the big physicist who called him out on the fact that there weren't any black people in the first series? Why can't I think of his name right now? I can see the interview with Johnny Carson like in my head.
Carl Sagan?
Yes. Because I was thinking Carl, but I was like, so like Carl Sagan actually, like after the first movie came out, he actually said something about how there were no people of color at all in this film, and that this is supposed to be a film of like a vast universe. And he was very surprised that there were only white people in it. And he like called it out very like, you know, very bluntly on Johnny Carson. And, you know, then Lando appeared, the very next movie. And then I feel in this movie, what ended up happening was that George was like, oh, I got to get other cultures involved. But what he did was he made the aliens caricatures.
Right, yeah.
Of those. And like, it is still very difficult to sit down and watch this film. It was hard then when it premiered. And I think like in general, society was less aware of those things. But it is particularly difficult now, more aware, like just like every time, because like on some level, like Jar Jar is a walking minstrel show. Like I defend him because I feel like the fandom like gives him a lot of shit. And I don't think that the character or even the things that he does is half as bad as what people says. Like I actually sometimes laugh at Jar Jar and the things that he does. I'm like, oh, Jar Jar. But like honestly, like subterranean kind of Rasta speaking, like, and they don't care about the rest of the world. It's kind of like they're fine in their own little space, like they're isolationist. And it's like, and then the Trade Federation and they have like Asian accents, and it's just like it's all over the place. Those are just two examples.
Well, and then Naboo itself, like the culture of the humans on Naboo has this like mid-century modern Oriental like appreciation thing, like that fad that like our grandparents were into once they'd already had their kids. Like that era of like, let's collect some like cool artwork that is coming from abroad kind of vibe is in all of their dress, all of their architecture. You know, it's like this weird fusion of Venice and like classical China in terms of how it all looks, but it's all very white people.
Yeah. Well, again, you know, and this is this actually came up because someone online was upset because they didn't feel like with the new Star Wars Visions show that like Star Wars should be involved with samurai, and like people online were like, I have a really hard pill for you to swallow right now. There's been several videos of people being like, this and that and the helmet and Amidala's all of her outfits from the first movie
or Fortress, the movie that Star Wars was written as a ripoff of,
and Seven Samurai and like just like throwing things out like that, you know. But you know, the truth is there's always been some borrowing, right, from Asian cultures, but this is like this movie in particular like really doubles down on that bullshit, and it's bad. It's pretty bad. So you know, I mean, again, I feel like he got the wrong message. Like he was like, I'm gonna make it multicultural. No, like that's not how to do it.
Well, he was like, I'm gonna make it multicultural, but I'm gonna cast all my friends.
Yeah, exactly.
Or go through central casting for the majority of it. Like, yeah, I mean, some of it's of the times and some of it's that, like, he hadn't advanced with the times. Like, you can argue with, like, the first Star Wars, probably, like, when they were just looking for cheap extras they could get. It's the people who could afford to be off work and, you know, fit in the very restricted, list of clothes that they had to offer.
Right.
You know, they're probably, like, there's probably an excuse for the first Star Wars.
Yes.
Just in terms of the pool of people, if you weren't actively making an effort. Probably. Although,
possibly.
We also know there are a lot of actors who were black who were in Hollywood at the time, because that's also the same era as like blaxploitation movies. So, you know. Also, like, even though part of the time they were in England, there are definitely black people. Yep. And Indian people, Desi people.
Yeah. There's actually lots of varied people in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, crazy when you have a world-spanning empire, how you will be multicultural. Imagine if you were a galaxy-spanning empire.
Yeah. Like, not just, I mean, okay, like, I get it. Like, maybe you don't have that for the actual empire, you know, actors, since you want to drive the space Nazi thing home. Right. But, like, definitely the rebels. Like, you know, you can get, and like, honestly, I don't know. I don't know if there really is an excuse other than they didn't really think of it.
And it's true. Like, again, I don't want to put too much on Lucas in the 70s. The production was hell. Like, we talked about the first Star Wars as episode 40 of this show. It was the first proper fifth episode that we did where we were discussing a movie that we thought overcame challenges. And Lucas went through a lot, and I understand when you are putting together a movie that everyone thinks is going to fail, it's a tough bind. But at the same time, when his initial cut of the movie was terrible, fucking all of the big names in Hollywood helped him out, you know?
Yeah.
Spielberg helped him out. Brian De Palma helped him out. Like,
Lucky
Francis Ford Coppola, like that, you know, he was part of this murderer's row of talent that, you know, he had at his beck and call. Yeah. He could have at least asked someone to be like, hey, also, how can we make this look diverse and whatnot? Like, I realize it probably wasn't on the forefront of their mind, but at the same time, this is the 70s. This is not like the 30s, you know?
Yeah. You know, again, but for this film, for Phantom Menace, and I said the right film this time. This film, I feel like this is. I want to say that this was his misguided attempt of making it multicultural.
Well, this is a movie that has no feedback. Like, everything about it. Like, it's him, his first impulse is he goes and he's like, oh, let's get all these pretty actors to come on board from my, like, the first group of headshots I saw. And I didn't think like, oh, can I include more people? The same way he definitely wrote one draft and then they made this movie. Like, of all the movies, this is the one where there was no feedback beyond just being like, I love it, George. It's great. And there was no critical feedback either. Like, at least the other prequels have people saying these were the problems with the first one. This one, everyone's just like, I can't wait to see what you're going to do, George. Like, this sounds so great, George. Oh, that sounds like a really good idea, George. Every single part of it. And this is a movie that he built from scratch while, like, sitting back and having people, like, run with his ideas and try to make it into reality, as opposed to him struggling to communicate with people to convey the ideas he had and hearing responses from people being like, oh, that's an idea. What about this? This might be better. And actually working with like that give and take that is the creative process.
I have to say, I did not say this, but I kind of, just because we're talking about this feedback thing, one of my very good friends, and I will not name her just in case. I mean, I don't know. Maybe George Lucas has Hitman. One of my good friends and I, because before, for the young people who possibly are listening, before this movie came out, they did a re-release in theaters of all of the original movies.
Yes, they did.
With special touches that George put in himself, with the advanced special effects that he could now put in. So there are scenes that he couldn't do before that now he could do because technology had advanced, partially because of work that his team had done, which is incredible work. So I'm giving him props to that. However, when we left, I don't remember which one it was, my friend turned to me and said, maybe he wasn't a genius per se. It's just that sometimes limitations really do you a favor and curtail what should or should not be.
Yeah.
And I think like on some level, right, if you don't have someone around to tell you to kill the baby, like kill the thing that you really like that's probably not working, you end up with the Phantom Menace.
Exactly. And that's why we have the 5th episodes of this show. Like, we want to celebrate the shows that work through adversity to make a better project, because Star Wars is such a good example of that. And you can see even by the time you get to Return of the Jedi, which is the first episode of the proper show, that those limitations start to go away and that they're not making the best movie possible. Like, adversity allows us to test ideas and for the cream to rise to the top. And you can see that with Star Wars, you can see that with Empire, but even by the time you're getting to Jedi, you're starting to run out of the pushback that actually forces you to develop. The struggle to become a butterfly is what allows them to actually fly.
Yeah, and it's true for a lot of properties, but I definitely think that it's true of those. In fact, I ran out and bought the set that had the regular DVDs of the regular cut before it was no longer available anywhere else, because I needed my childhood to be intact before George messed with his original vision. But yeah, I mean, I think that unfortunately this was a very ambitious movie that did not pay off. And that meant that every other movie in this series had to try to course correct and try to rush to create the story. And I don't know if it's just because, like, George wanted to give us time with Anakin where he was innocent. And again, that is another reason to go with a young child, so that we'd be like, oh, but he was innocent. But I don't think that was necessary. I think that in the long run, it made the first movie and the second film just feel so arduous because the second film basically had to like try to catch you up as possible to like action Anakin. And I feel like because we had to focus on him being like active and the love story, which was terrible, there was no room for anything else, really.
Yeah.
You know, no real development.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about that here, and, you know, I maintain that Attack of the Clones does enough to explain the universe to you compared to Phantom Menace. Like, everything in Phantom Menace is recapped pretty quickly in that movie.
Yeah. I just now that we've decided the age difference and the odd couple, now I am sorely missing that. I am missing the enemies to lover friendship that I need to see. And, you know, it honestly is enemies to lovers, asexual addiction. That's fine. And, cause they're Jedis and, but, yeah, I miss that. I miss that.
Yeah, I bring up in this the Godfather, the complete epic that had been marketed for a while before 3 came out, but then once 3 was out, they kind of pulled back on it, but where they like recut it so it was like one continuous story.
Right.
And I talk about how unsatisfying a movie that is. And I think ultimately, looking at the prequels, for all the work that they are, they had an impossible task. That was only afforded them by virtue of this kind of just like fun element that George inserted into his work, setting it in media res and pretending that you were jumping into the middle of a story. So much so that in the re-releases after Star Wars first came out, but in the home video releases and so forth, they added the episode 4, 5, 6 kind of component there. Like that only happens here. Like everywhere else where we have like, oh yeah, like this series of books then jumped into prequels or something like that. It's either a sub-series or it's like the latest book happens to be a prequel. Like I'm thinking of The Magician's Nephew from like the Chronicles of Narnia, for example, where like that's still book 5. It just happens to be a prequel to the rest of the Narnia books. And that's across the board. Like the Stainless Steel Rats did that. Like if you have a book series that has a prequel book, it is going to still be in the sequence of the books that have come out so far because book 1 remains book 1. You know, like you can't all of a sudden shift the numbers like you could an Excel spreadsheet. And so they had this weird chance to be like, hey, this is the actual first part, but we're still jumping in media res. Like we're still dealing with a galaxy far, far away where there are fucking knights with laser swords and magic powers. Like, there's a story well before this, you know, like there's so much backstory well before all of these movies. So then what you're saying is this is the story we're telling. It's not the complete story. It's just the story we're telling. We're actually at chapter 1. And there was no way they were ever going to succeed because it always was going to come out after what the actual chapter 1 was, what Star Wars was, because Star Wars introduce the audience to the world because the audience literally had never seen this world before. And then since then, everything is built on that foundation in a way that they just assume you know what the Jedi Knights are in this movie. And there's no chance that the world would not know what Jedi Knights are. That's true, but it's still unsatisfying as a movie to just not have an assumption of like, well, here we're coming into the world. And like, I wonder if the movie had just been, this is, you know, if they never dealt with the episode stuff and this was just the 4th, 5th, and 6th Star Wars movies. And they had to be like, all right, we have to build a story from this. And like, they could have all been prequels, or maybe the last one could have been like a super sequel. So it's like, you know, really spanning a huge amount of time. Or just build new stakes so that we see how they then we treat the first few movies as falling action and that it's all in the wake of this much bigger thing. And maybe it like is sequel bait for something future, something else. Again, like this is about the time where I'm like first like really like consolidating sort of my thoughts and like really like vocalizing for the first time my thoughts about how prequels should always be informing the larger narrative. And how like they really work in the middle of a story, but not the end of the story. And so the fact that these 3 come at the very end makes it difficult to have their conclusion matter. I think they always had an impossible task. And I think that giving this giving this to a person who had infinite power in terms of what could be produced was not the right idea, because there was like, you needed to have a lot of people in the room trying to like work this out into a coherent, this is what we're kind of building to, so that it actually matters and it doesn't feel like, oh, we're actually just getting bonus features from a movie that came out in 1983.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like also there's a missed opportunity. Like, if you're really going to, like, let's say you want to entice the children. I mean, like, not that I'm saying that you should steal from other tropes, but, like, maybe you have Anakin show up, like, at 15 at the Jedi Order's doors. And maybe, like, you have basically the introduction of the Order and what it's like to join the Order even late through his eyes, and kind of build up that way as a secondary kind of through line to like what is the collapse of this world and in or this government, like this galaxy government. And then you can also, like, because it's like within the Jedi Order, you're able to give kind of a backstory to the Jedis, you know, because he's learning. This is like a very classic staple, you know, like normal cliche shit to do. But you have him kind of like learning about what the do's and the don'ts are. And so then you kind of get to know like kind of what are the political pitfalls of being there. But you can also, because it's kind of a school setting, right? It's an order, but it's a place where people are training. You can kind of have moments where it is more lighthearted, where he's making friends, where he's learning things, where he's doing his training. And in that way, you get a chance to kind of show Jedi training and do maybe cool Jedi shit. Like, and even show like groups of people doing cool coordinated Jedi shit together, like in a courtyard, you know, and kind of like, you know, show him being trained. Because, you know, here's the thing. No one in Star Wars ever actually finishes their training. At least not on screen. Nobody ever does it. But like, I think then what is kind of great about that thought, just for me as a fan, is I would get to see like what the Jedi Order would be like before this. And so like, as someone who's watched Luke train with something like just like a little metal globe on a spaceship, like in a hurried training to kind of try to prepare him for this ultimate evil, I can see like what this prepared training was like before, when the Jedi Order was giant and it was big. And you don't really have to do the inklings of something being wrong till maybe even the end or the next movie. You don't have to begin unraveling it. And that way, we as a people, as an audience, oh my God, like, but we as an audience can like feel more also with our proposed change of the Jedi Order falling apart in the second movie, because we've also watched like these people. And then when he's fucking killing children and he's killing like things, you know, killing off all these Jedis at the end, maybe we know some of them. Like maybe like, you know, maybe it's someone who he's actually grown up with. And then we see what the true sacrifice is. It's not just a child. It's people that he's trained with. It's people that he knows. It's people that he believes is on the wrong side of this. That he has seen the new light, that he has seen the way, and that is following the Emperor and his grand vision. And this line, like all Jedis must end, because there will never be balance. There will always be Siths, and there will always be Jedi. As long as there are Jedi, there will be Siths. As long as there is a full Jedi army, there will be a full Sith army. So Palpatine convinces him that he's just gotta like kill everybody, We've just got to kill everybody. I'll get rid of all the Siths. You get rid of all the Jedis, and then you come to me, and we'll take care of this universe. We'll lead the universe. There'll be peace everywhere because we're going to bring order, which is a total fascist thing to say, right? Fascists believe that they're actually doing what they're doing for the betterment of the world. This is something that like Anakin could buy into, and by having him come as an orphan at 15 to the Jedi Order because his mom left him some fucking note that that's where he should go after her death. Yeah, that's right. Kill his mom. He goes there and that's it. So this is the only home he's ever known and he kills it off. I don't know. This is better. I like it. But this
it's definitely strong. And like it points to what the central problem is, which is that Lucas is so insulated in his existence. And I am not trying to be mean. He's struggled in specific regards, but he's just never been like a man of the people. That's just the thing. And so it's the Hollywood writing problem of everything, where it's like always about the big presentation because like Hollywood works on here's a big sale, here's a big pitch, here's a big movie.
Yeah.
But like I always imagined when I heard that the prequels are coming out that the third movie was going to be like a Highlander style. We're whittling down the Jedi. It's the nadir. Like it's impossible for Lucas not to imagine just one sudden occurrence, like one big thing, one Order 66. And that is ultimately the downfall of this franchise because it's structured the way most of the challenges of his life have been, which are specifically get to this one moment and succeed or fail.
Yeah.
And that is a way that it can happen, and it's dramatically interesting for movies, but it's not how it always happens. And in fact, real institutions usually have to like fade away.
It mostly dies slowly.
Right.
It mostly it gets chipped away at slowly and surely, and fascism creeps up.
It doesn't just win.
It doesn't just win.
It has to have the beer hall push and then not succeed and then rally again and like only get 30% of the vote, but that's just enough to turn the tide. And then slowly to convince the people who are like, I won't stand with you, but I'm not going to fight you.
Yeah.
Eventually to be on your side. Like it's the problem. Like, and I've talked about how like the Star Wars movies kind of reflect the political view of the consensus of the time, in that it's like there's a lot of optimism and more a rebellious streak in the first Star Wars movie, and then you start to see the shift towards like more of a Reagan-esque kind of existence of the 80s, and these are Clintonian, I might say. yeah. Not a lot of substance, lots of cigars. Yeah, I mean, like, there's certainly some good ideas going on here. I think, and again, I think Phantom Menace, I think, is the most ambitious with like the strongest point that you're trying to make. Like, it's a really charismatic leader who seems like the nice guy on your adventure, like saving your world. But it's not subtle enough, and it's not really appreciative of the true insidious, infectious nature of evil in the real world.
Right, and I think that it's sad because there is it's such a missed opportunity to kind of talk about or to illustrate the way that a society can break down. And because that ultimately, like, Anakin would represent us, right? How does a person get lured from something that is altruistic and about, it's perceivedly altruistic, and about serving a community and keeping balance and that kind of thing, right? And get basically pulled in to a fascist ideal. And the truth is that anyone can be led into a space where they will start believing things. And often tools that are used in fascism are fear and hate and otherism and things that make you feel like you're going to be special, and especially when you don't feel special. And that's what Anakin's story should be. The fact that anyone can really just get swallowed up inside of their own insecurities, inside of their own fears, inside of like their own inadequacies. Because that's the thing. What would make it more interesting to all of us, right? They make a point of saying, oh, he's too old because, even though he's like 10, because because he's, we usually have them as babies. But no one really makes Anakin feel this fully. Like there's like a discussion, but it's not like ever pressed on. And even in like the second movie in Attack of the Clones, it's kind of like, well, he's just a star. Like, yeah, he's a little bit, but we got him young, but he's amazing. And I feel like he has to have imposter syndrome. Like Anakin has to have imposter syndrome throughout this movie. And that's why I think like him being a smuggler, like you suggested, or being someone who showed up late at the doors of the Jedi Order and kind of coming late to it and feeling like he's behind all of his peers and feeling like he's always working to catch up and feeling like he's always chasing Obi-Wan. Like, even though he's a mentor and he's a brother, he's never quite measures up to him. And yes, he does amazing things on his own. And then, and you have that in the first film and maybe even part of this, second film. And maybe you can have him like win a huge victory and then like, oh, it's me. And then he gets cocky and then his ego takes over. Because here's the thing, when you're insecure, you're still insecure even when you're sure of yourself. And because we never fully get that, I mean, like maybe you get a little insecurity when it comes to their relationship, which is where the creepiness works, I guess. You don't really get that. And so, like, I just feel like you've got 3 movies of an Anakin arc where Anakin doesn't really have real growth. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
he doesn't have an actual journey. Like, he has a story, but there's no actual journey for Anakin. Like, he was a kid, and then he left home, and he missed his mom, and then he was like, doing cool stuff with a lightsaber, and then he thought that older woman he met years ago was real hot, and then he broke some rules, and like he was like, yeah, and then like he couldn't be with her, and there was like other stuff that happened, and then this guy was like, hey, I got a really great plan. I'm evil, and you should be evil. Go kill all these children. He's like, okay, cool, and then he became Darth Vader.
Yeah. I mean, and yeah. Because I keep looking, I keep thinking about, like, even if you're committed to the young kid, why not have him be like a refugee of the war that's going on Naboo, rather than like, okay, well, he's a slave that has like a cheeky race sequence. Like, every choice that they made to introduce this character and make him as interesting as possible is averted.
Yeah, like let's be honest. He's got a pretty. This is going to sound terrible, but I'm going to say this. He's got a pretty cushy life for a slave.
Kind of, yeah.
I feel so guilty saying that,
but it's true. It's true.
Honestly, but he's still living with his mom. Like, she still makes him meals.
They have a house.
He has a job. He is not a slave. He's a child worker. Like, they use the word.
No, I mean,
slave.
he is a slave. Like I don't want to like sugarcoat that, but like it.
But I'm saying that, like, I don't feel like I just wish that it was like, I mean, I'm not saying it has to be Conan hardship. Like, I'm not saying he's got to like push a wheel, but I just feel like there's not. I don't know, like, it just it takes too long to get to the point where where he has the rug pulled out from underneath him. And where he would, like, live with this insecurity or possible, like, trauma that would be the crack in his armor to kind of turn him. I just feel like, I don't know. He's a very cute kid. And, and the pod race scene is cool, but too long and actually shouldn't exist.
Yep. Yeah, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think we're on the same page. We're just.
I think so. It's disappointing.
You know what this has become?
Oh yeah.
This has become a certain point of view instead of another pass.
I think we're a little bit more on track, at least, like, talking about this movie specifically. But yeah, that's probably just by virtue of the fact that we don't have at least 3 more movies ahead of us, if not what actually turned out to be 4-ish. plus like all the series. Anyway, yeah, that was a weird time. And thanks everyone for joining us on this journey. I feel like it was really good to revisit this, and it was really good to get your thoughts, Sam, because I think you have a really nice perspective that is different than the ones that Ben, Addy, and I, who often really were just arguing about degrees as opposed to like monumental changes between our thoughts. So it's nice to have like more points of view.
You're welcome. I do have a certain point of view. Yeah, I do.
Yes, you do. You do. And listeners, thank you for coming on this journey.
Yeah, we're sorry, and thank you.
Well, I mean, like, I stand by those episodes. I think that they were good episodes. They're certainly of the time, but like, you can check out the original Certain POV feed. So while the podcast is no longer up for the RSS feed, it is still up on our YouTube channel, and you can find each of those episodes at certainpov.com. So if you want to check out more of what it was like, and we had lots of great Star Wars or other nerd stuff discussions. It wasn't all just like, here's a review of a movie that just came out. Although, if you're a Marvel stan, there were a lot of them. If you're a Planet of the Apes stan, we had a really good episode about that. Go check those Certain POV episodes out. You can also check out plenty of new shows that we've been adding. As of the time this is dropping, we will have added Fables and Reflections, a Neil Gaiman podcast that J.D. Martin, part of Certain Point of View already with Comics Quest, and Angela Bones Bullock, who has been a frequent guest on Comics Quest, have been doing. And it's great. They are several episodes in at this point. It's wonderful. We've also added Circling Circe, which is a book club podcast talking about the book Circe by Madeline Miller. Recently added Books That Burn, another book show. We have been very literate recently, and I approve.
Me too.
That's really good, because we have a lot of nerd conversations, and it started as nerd. But like, let's, we want to prove that we can actually like string a sentence together here as well. So that's good.
My TBR pile is not too pleased because there might be book suggestions and. It's quite high.
And there's plenty of classic ones as well, judging book covers, and also Circle of Friendship. Tons of books. So many books.
All the books.
But that just shows the amount of stuff we're doing at Certain Point of View. It started off as a Star Wars podcast and then became Star Wars and movies and also some D&D stuff. And we have since grown. We've got so much video game content. Reignite is coming out with a new season, so check that out. Like, there's such great stuff going on at the network. It's a lot of fun. And while you're at certainpov.com, you can also find a link to our Discord server. We are currently having this call on Discord. You can just come hang out. We won't bite. We're really nice.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes there are Ewoks in the chat, so they might bite. But don't worry, it'll be fine.
Yeah, it'll be a welcome kind of bite, a nibbling, if you will.
Yeah.
But come, just, hang out. We're actually having a really good time there. It has been a welcome solace in the face of all of the stuff that has happened in the past year and a half. Mm-hmm. So it's been nice to have. It's been a great time, and I really am proud of the work that we've been putting out. If you don't feel comfortable going there to interact with us, you can find us on Twitter. You can find the podcast at Another Pass. You can find me at Case Aiken. Sam, where can they find you?
They can find me here. And at Discord, on our Discord, because I will check it out. If you write something, I'll check it out. But if you have any complaints, please tweet at Another Pass or directly to Case, because he's customer service.
Yeah, well, and I also actually thrive on that hashtag engagement. So yeah, bring it on. Come at me. I'm so glad we got a chance to revisit these episodes. It's crazy to think that. So these have been episodes 117, 18, and 19, which means that the show has been going for a long time. And we've had pretty good amounts of conversation on each of these in addition to the original episodes. So that just takes it back to the just all in those early days of the show and of the network. But it's been fun to revisit, and it's been fun to actually kind of grow further from that, both because times have changed and your opinion has been valuable. So listeners, I hope you appreciated it.
Yeah.
But we're done with this retrospective now.
Yep.
Sam, now that we are done with this retrospective, what have we got up next time?
Well, boys and girls, hold on to your seats. Next time on Another Pass, we'll be talking about Highlander 2, The Quickening. But until then, if you enjoyed this, pass it on.
Thanks for listening to Certain Point of View's Another Pass podcast. Don't miss an episode. Just subscribe and review the show on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com.
Boop, 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 boop.
Da-da.
And Craig, you did great, buddy.
So, I have a question. Have you ever wanted to get into comics, but you just didn't know where to start? Well, welcome to Comics Quest. I'm JD Martin, and every week I sit down with a guest to talk a comic that I think anybody can pick up and start their comics reading journey. We take a look at psychedelic sci-fi, fantastical action, heart-wrenching love stories, and of course, superheroes. So check us out at certainpov.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Yay! That was basically brainstorming. That's how brainstorming works.
Are you tired of watching your beloved characters being tortured by careless authors?
Are you sick of feeling like they could have swapped out all of the painful action and the plot would remain untouched? Subscribe to Books That Burn, the fortnightly book review podcast focusing on fictional depictions of trauma.
We assume that the characters' reactions are reasonable and focus on how badly or well they were served by their authors.
Join us for our minor character spotlights, main character discussions, and favorite non-traumatic things in the dark books we love.
Find us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.
It's just, maybe it's good that Facebook crashed. It's where most people are getting their misinformation.
Yeah. Well, though there was like conspiracy brain in me that today there was like this whole leak or not leak, but like a leak occurred and the news like covered it.
Oh,
What they're calling the Pandora Papers. Like all these like tax shelters for like the super rich all across the world. And there's like the little piece of me being like, someone like crash like all the big social media platforms or like try to crash them all to prevent the spread of this because that's like really, really bad.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
And again, that's conspiracy brain. I know it sounds crazy, but like I asked that question of myself and I was like, I don't have a reason to say no. I mean, they'll be like, Mark, you're taking one for the team.
Listen, I honestly believe that you have to believe in at least 2 or 3 reasonable conspiracies because there are conspiracies that have totally been proven, like the CIA funneling drugs into inner city spaces in the 80s and 70s. Like that's been proven now that there was a drug line there and that's a thing that people were saying and people didn't believe and now we know is true. So, I mean, I don't think it was Mark Zuckerberg because they did estimate that Facebook lost $50 billion.
Before the Wicked Witch of the West and those gals from Salem, there was Circe, the captivating and kind of catastrophic Greek witch who did more than just turn men into pigs.
I'm Rose.
I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Gloria. Join us this fall on Circling Circe, the podcast where we talk about Madeline Miller's incredible book, Circe.
We go through the novel chapter by chapter. We laugh, we cry from laughing. We swoon over Daedalus and other Greek hotties and talk way too much about food, life, and scented candles.
I'm hydrated. I'm ready. I'm pumped to talk about Greek gods and titans.
Let's do this.
Lasagna is not supposed to be cool. It's supposed to be eaten hot, stupid.
Who just looked at a cow and was like, hey, sexy, moo right over here. Like
it's 11:45. I need to go eat my liver.
My Prometheus pate.
And Granny's like, get out.
We post every Wednesday, so mark your calendars.
Make like Scylla.
Grab a sailor.
And dive in.
Find Circling Circe on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Do we want to do an outro? Or
yeah.
Is that your outro?
That's it.
I'm kind of sad that Matt's not going to hear all our lunacy. Tonight we've been particularly punchy. Like
I'm sorry, I'm tired, and I decided to switch from
no, it's okay.
I decided to switch to wine, and yeah.
No, it's good. It's good. I think that's perfect for the Phantom Menace.
This is a classic CPOV episode.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.